Good evening and welcome to the January 20th, 2026 Board of Finance regular meeting. Thank you to Simsbury Community Media for filming at the last minute. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For members of the public, while this agenda was posted and filed with the town clerk per our finance director with our thanks, thank you Amy. It is therefore a properly noticed and legal meeting compliant with FOIA. However, the agenda was not posted online until noon today. And as of 3 p.m. it was not listed on the town calendar. Providing information to the public in a timely and systematic way is a core responsibility of local government. It ensures transparency and promotes public trust. As chair of the Board of Finance, I apologize publicly to members of our community for falling short, and will ask the town manager to take all appropriate measures and actions to ensure this never happens again. I want to acknowledge and thank Simsbury Community Television, who was able to find a last-minute volunteer to film today. Because the public did not have adequate notice it in a systematic manner, I'm going to ask for a motion to table the request for supplementary appropriation until our next regular meeting of the Board of Finance in February.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The other thing I'm going to ask for is a motion to amend the agenda to add discussion of the new website. There are solicitations for input and I wanted to get board input on the new website. So may I have a motion to amend the agenda to add discussion of the website?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The first selectman, Wendy, indicated to me the management is considering the removal of meeting minutes from the town's website, leaving only 10 years of history accessible online. I'm raising a concern that this action would significantly limit public access to information, this board's ability to reference and research past actions, and diminish transparency. By way of comparison, the town of Glastonbury maintains online access to meeting minutes dating back to at least 2008. And so I will request that the digital meeting minutes and agenda remain on the website. The minutes, according to LaLifa, need to be both searchable and in an organic manner. In addition, it appears that the meeting minutes must currently be downloaded in order to be viewed when I went on the site. I respectfully request the town consider adding an in-browser viewing option so that residents may easily review minutes without the need to download files. Ask for any other comments on the new website that people have noticed. There any?
I'll just say as someone who has had to look at records, state and local, the format that Lisa is describing here, it fits what I needed as a non-public official at that point to make it usable data. Unless there's some big IT reason that would make it impossible, I would hope we would go and do that. It seems practical. It sounded like 10 years was the limit being talked about. As we heard last time we were talking with Board of Ed at the Tri-Board, large capital projects coming along, every 10 or 15 years is absolutely normal in municipal government. So it seems appropriate that we would have access to how the last people who had to make those big capital decisions debated it. So I do think there's a practical reason. I appreciate everyone who's gonna help figure a way out on this.
Additionally, I have a comment to make that should there be an event like the pandemic, a global pandemic that happens once in every few decades, that future boards should be in a position to look at what we did during the global pandemic of 2020, if it were to happen in 21-20. It has to be searchable in some way that's easily accessible to the public in an organic record that's available to the public. That does not require additional requests like FOIA, etc., because that costs the taxpayers money, a FOIA request. So I would second that minutes must be available.
Okay, can we say by consensus the board supports keeping the minutes open and accessible more than 10 years and that they be an option other than downloading?
I'd be fair.
Yes.
Okay, by consensus, we'll make that recommendation and include them in the minutes. Okay.
I'll share comments at our meeting on that.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, I'm going to take a personal note here to recognize that the Board of Finance was well represented at the Martin Luther King Simsbury celebration on Monday. We had the former Vice Chair Art House and the current Vice Chair Lalita Shivaswamy were outstanding guest readers for a lovely event, and of course, our first selectman gave an excellent welcoming introduction to the guest speaker. So do wanna acknowledge that publicly and thank you for your participation and thank they were as we know, because we often have to read things aloud at the Board of Finance, they were great readers.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was very meaningful.
Good, I'm glad. Mark, before we get going, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to update us on Two Farms Village and the Simsbury Performing Arts Project.
Thanks, Chair, and good evening, everybody, and to those watching at home. The Two Farms Village Road closing is expected to happen around the 22nd or 23rd. Just coordinating with the town attorney and Mr. Gerard's attorneys for some important lien releases that the town needs for work that was done under phase 1 prior to closing. Obviously, we need to make sure, as we reported to the Board of Finance recently, that all of the various contractors have been fully paid, and we're doing that now. In fact, I just signed the final extension through the 23rd, so we're looking forward to that. Also, an offer.
When you say the 23rd, is that the 23rd of January?
It is.
Okay, so it's like 3 days.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's very soon.
got it. Thank you.
Also, want to extend an invitation to any of your members, Chair Hebner, who want to take a tour of the building. Be happy to facilitate, and I'll be making the same offer to the Board of Selectmen colleagues on Monday night next. But if anybody be interested in just peeking their head in and taking a look at, the building and some of the work that's been going on there, I think it would be really great. And please call my office or send me an email, and we'd be able to do that. And the other item was.
At the Simsbury Performing Arts Center.
So as you know, the PAC delivered their check, Chair, for $32,000 and some change on time last week. And I believe you, our finance director, has deposited it.
On Friday, just to
Friday,
confirm
yeah.
it was deposited on Friday.
And just again, I think a point of personal privilege is that, the board of directors of the PAC did a tremendous job raising nearly $1 million. And it's been a tough number of years as this project has been moving forward. But they did exactly what they said they would do, and we're pleased to report that to the board at this point. There is a referendum coming up on Saturday, and that will be for the appropriation that your board, Chair Hebner, approved for $388,000. That's the additional money. And the last of the money that would be needed to get the project the CO that it needs. So want to thank this board and also our Board of Selectmen and all the members of the public that have supported this. And I can't say more because there's a referendum, but we're almost there.
Mark, I saw that you had it on the front page of the website, so thank you for that.
No, thank you, because you remind us. We had posted it, and as we'll get into later on the website, because we're currently running the beta version of the new website, and there've been some issues, as there always are. We ran it again just to make sure, so hopefully everybody's seeing it out there. We also contacted the Patch. There are signs up around the town, as you know, reminding the public that referendum is the 21st.
Could you please also post it on the town's social media website?
We will indeed, yes, Chair, absolutely. Thank you for that.
All right, thank you for that. Any questions?
Yeah, on Two Farms Village. So if the closing is expected at the end of this week or by the end of this month, what's the schedule for when we expect to begin using the facility for the new?
Yeah, great question. So we're still a couple months away from that, and Tom Roy's been in touch with the authorities on the Board of Ed's side to give them, pretty frequent updates in terms of what the time looks like. The only thing I did that I can report is I did, at his recommendation, authorize our beginning some work on the project prior to closing. That was well considered. It wasn't significant work, but it was enough to help mitigate that time where we'd been pushing things out a little bit. Obviously, the Board of Ed is eager to get in there, and we have, the good news is we've got commitments from people that are gonna be putting their children and other districts that are putting people there. So I think the bigger point is, and I know many of you on this board or the prior board that approved this at any rate, we're looking at, are we gonna be full pretty quickly? And, I can report that what I hear from the superintendent, it's looking pretty good there. So they're eager to get in quickly. We've done a little bit of work that's on us in advance of the closing, and we're gonna try to get in there as soon as we can.
So it sounds like we expect students to be in the building for the next school year?
Yeah, that's what I'm being told.
I think it's sooner than that, but
Maybe even sooner.
And about the PAC, when we voted to approve the supplemental appropriation, send it to referendum, there was a long list of value engineered terms that were being eliminated in order to fit us within the 388 and allow us to retain the 3% contingency. Has any of that changed? Is there any update on that?
It's pretty consistent with what we reported before. The only thing to add is that we had a meeting, Tom, Roy and I, with the PAC. I think might have even been my first day back from medical leave where we reported to them the decision of the Public Building Committee with respect to 3 change order requests. A couple were denied, one was approved. We reported that to them. I'm happy to share it with the board by email. I don't have it in front of me, but we wanted to make sure that they were aware that we're not spending a nickel more.
Well, actually, I'm glad you brought up the change boards because the one that was approved was about $30,000 related to domestic water stuff. We talked a lot about water as it relates to fire suppression and things like that.
Yep.
Is that 30,000 included in that?
It
That
is.
additional scope?
Yes, it is.
Sorry, I went too fast. It is included in that or is it additional scope?
It's not additional scope, it's not additional funding, it's 30,000 that we've got in contingency as a result of the 388.
So
No,
it was
no
not,
additional funds.
it wasn't on the list of known things from our last meeting that
That's
were
correct.
water related. Okay. So that 30,000 is within what we assume right now is going to be an approved referendum total amount?
Correct? We're not asking for any more money.
We seemed pretty tight just with the things that we already had. How is losing that additional 30,000 from the CR, from the MR, the management reserve, gonna affect us?
We weren't as tight as you might have assumed we were tight, I guess would be my sense of things. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but it's we were clear that this 388 is the final appropriation request for the project to meet the standards necessary to get a CO and to protect the $900,000 DECD grant. That's the underlying number. The intricacies of what the pluses and minuses are, our town engineer and the Public Building Committee are working on that, but I've been assured no additional funding is required.
I recall us saying that if we were gonna use anything in the actual contingency itself, we were gonna come back to this group before it actually was used.
I think what we had agreed to respectfully was to keep the Board of Finance intimately involved in it, but that we were not looking for additional approvals to spend the 388. No additional
Right, I think we
funds.
talked about, exactly, like we said, we weren't gonna be getting an approval, but before the money was spent, it was gonna be notified to us. And that Tom was gonna be coming, I think, every month with an update or something along those lines.
The motion was for the last 188, it had to come to us if we were gonna dip into it. We can go back and review the motion, but it was
Whatever the board's preference is. The Public Building Committee approved it, I signed the change order, one of them, and denied the others. So that's the report we're making this month. Happy to report every month. I'm not sure that I interpreted the motion to mean that we needed Board of Finance approval
Not
for
approval,
disbursement. Yeah,
not approval, it was notification.
okay.
I was the
Happy
one
to
that
do it.
actually pushed for it
Yeah.
because I feel responsible to the town right now. If we had to ever go back on this
Oh,
again,
sure, yeah,
there's no way that this should be a surprise to anybody.
yeah.
So
Well,
like we should be getting a very formal but simple, it shouldn't become its own bureaucracy, but a simple report just to say, where we are in our spend and if we're dipping into the contingency. Because it wasn't a full contingency, like we were,
Right.
I forget what Tom said, but at 10 or
3%.
15%, we were at like 3 or 5 or something like that.
3%.
Yeah,
Which is
so-
exactly why I'm trying to understand if this 30,755 puts us over the point where now we are eating into that, as we discussed, smaller than we would like contingency.
So what I would just remind the board with respect to that is that the project is, let's just say for tonight's discussion, 60% complete with the biggest risk to the project at the front end. We've already established the risk coming from soils, we've established the risk coming from the water and the well system, we understand all of that. So I think what you have is a declining amount of risk as you get closer to the end of the project. And so I'm comfortable with the numbers as we sit here tonight. Hopefully
I think all of that could be true, and I'm actually not interested in whether or not it is true, trust you. However, it doesn't answer, does this specific 30,755 cross into what we last meeting were talking about as MR? I'm actually not
Well,
good or
then
bad or.
then let's say it does, and then that puts,
I think that's what I'm
okay.
trying to understand, yeah, do we know if it does? Are we now into that amount?
If it wasn't on the list of things that were known, then I would say it is.
Okay.
But your question earlier, at least I understood it to be, was does it force us into the contingent? For all I know, sitting here, we made additional cuts that mean that the answer to your question is no. And for example, we did deny 2 change orders. And I'm not sure as I sit here tonight if those were factored in to that list as well. So I'm not really able to.
How can we go back and figure out what we had agreed to
I
and just
have
get
it
on
right
track
here.
on that?
I
Okay.
have it right
Yeah.
here.
Thank
From
you.
the minutes, further move that the town has the authority to spend 200 of the supplemental appropriation, but must return to the Board of Finance to spend the remaining 188,000. So we'll need that in advance. We did talk with Bob, we are obligated to approve it as long as it's reasonable.
Sure,
But this is
sure.
a transparency component.
This is about transparency, that's all.
Right,
Yes.
So you want us to come back for a second approval?
Yeah.
Okay. Fine, happy to do it.
okay, perfect. So we spent 32 of it, so now we're just looking, once we hit that 200.
Okay. I just wanna make sure I've answered Art's question.
Oh, you have, yep.
We're on the same page?
I think so, yes.
Okay,
That
good.
was the
I
motion
think the
we approved
detail though, I
minutes.
think that this is all about like a bit of formality just around the
Yes.
details so that we can see the numbers, that's
I got
all. And again, I don't want that to be taken that Tom or someone should go spend, 3 days every month putting something together for us. Like this should be
Yeah,
a
yeah.
simple display of where we were, where we thought we were, and any changes from there, and if we're dipping into the contingency. But let's keep it simple.
Okay.
Back to Farms Village really quick, if you remember, we were, and you started to allude to it, Mark, we were very specific with the split between out of town and in town students to make the money, to make this thing work, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Are we tracking that, cause that was the thing, I was pushing on that back when we were going through this to say, if, and I forget the percentages now, but if we didn't hit certain percentages, this actually wasn't gonna make financial sense, but we felt very good about, and you mentioned that we've got a lot of folks from out of town. Is someone tracking like a break even or whatever it is on that metric?
Yes, I defer to the Board of Ed and Amy, you may know more about that, but I believe the answer is yes.
Yeah, so when we put the budget together, right now, so the budget for fiscal year 27 as a preview is essentially flat, no gain from the program, no loss from the program. We have more tuitioned in students than we anticipated, and then less Simsbury students than we anticipated because it started too late in the year. So they are doing the program this year, it's just at the high school.
Sure.
And then when they move in, probably they're hoping for the end of January, beginning of February to move in. We still have all of our tuitioned in students that are coming, but then we do not have the additional there's 2 sections. There was the middle school, the high school, and then there was the pre-K. Once the pre-K students come in next year, then the program will be to the good. But right now, there's no benefit either way. It's just neutral. We're just moving the money from the operating budget into that program. It's net neutral.
Is there a way that we could just quickly report on that periodically, just to say, going back to and I don't remember it off the top of my head, but you remember we had all those conversations to say, we needed at least, I'll make up a number, 60% of the students to be out of town. And to just be able to report that here, I think would be great.
Yeah, sure. So they're actually gonna do that as part of the fiscal year 27 budget presentation.
Okay,
Because it's in our high school right now, it's not in its own fund. And then once they do the budget presentation, we'll show you how it goes into the fund and how it nets out, so that we tied it right back to the presentation that we showed, so people can remember this is what we said and this is what actually happened.
great. Cause I remember it had a very short payback period
Right.
and that was a big part of it, so.
We remember that slide, Art, that was
Yes,
page
it's
three.
burned into my,
Yeah, mine too.
my mind as well.
That's the
Right.
reason we all approved it.
A really good ROI.
Okay, great, thank you.
Perfect. All right, so why don't we begin? We've got the finance director's report on pages 1 through 3 of our packet.
So nothing new to report. I just wanted to draw your attention to page 3. Our investment income, a couple changes here from the prior month. So our Connecticut stiff investment, our last month we reported 4.05% rate of percentage rate for interest. And this month it's down to 3.87%. Going down to the money market, here we had another adjustment. Last month we were at 3.82% and now we're down to 3.75%. And as you recall, when we did our budget during the fiscal year 26 process, we had used a target of 3.75%. We have one of our CDs that was cashed out, our 3-month CD, and that is now sitting in our money market. So then we have our 2 remaining CDs of the 6-month and 9-month. And as you can see, they're hovering around that 4% mark for the 6-month, and then the 3.83 for the 9-month. And then you'll see as we get into the projections for the quarterly, how I kind of translate that into where I thought that we would be by the end of the year.
So I just want to congratulate Amy and Art Wallace. The reason why we have those CDs is because of Art and Amy's coordination on that, earning a higher rate than the current student.
More Amy than Art.
Well, either way, it is a savings to the town. It is more revenue to the town than if we had just done nothing. So I want to thank everyone for that initiative there. Amy, last time you said you were gonna maybe have an update for us on the policies after the past audit, the cash.
Yes, so the fraud risk assessment, we are working on it, hoping for the next few weeks or so, we have somebody in my office that is out on FMLA, so that took a back burner. She will be back shortly, and then we have another person that's going out on FMLA. So we're kind of just playing catch up, and you will see there will be a request for some additional funding from the mid-year transfers to try to catch up from the momentum that we lost.
So do we have any sort of projection as to when we think we can get this done?
I honestly don't. If we had a few weeks of catch up by the time like we get somebody to help out, maybe within like the next month or 2, I would say April at the latest.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions in Amy's report? Amy, the only question I had is what is the DEP 2005 recreational trails grant and is there a match to it?
No, there's no match. I can look back and see the Board of Selectmen packet on that and give you an update.
Which one are you looking at?
I'm looking on page 2. It's a grant that is pending. That would obviously need a supplemental appropriation because it's above the 20,000 threshold that we do at year end. And I'm assuming the enhanced dial-a-rate and news service, those were budgeted grants, so those don't need a supplemental, is that correct?
Let me see what I'm looking at. Yes, all the rest of them were included as part of the budget process.
We have tabled the supplemental or postponed, I should say, the supplemental appropriation until our February meeting. So we can move on to the quarterly report. And Amy, since this is the first quarterly report for new members, if you could just go really slow.
Thank you. And this is on page,
We're starting on page 5.
So what's on the screen mimics what's in your packet. I'm just gonna hide some columns so that we can see. Wait. Do you need it bigger? Is that big enough? Good. Okay. So starting
Just what page are you on in the packet so that we can follow and read it?
Page 8.
8.
Page 8, okay.
So here we have our budgeted revenues for fiscal year 26, and then we have our projected revenue for fiscal year 26. So we start over here for the fiscal year 26. This was our budget that was approved referendum, or during the budget process, I should say. Expenditures are approved referendum. And we have our actual to date as of December 31st, 2025. So this is where we're coming in, our variance from budget to actual, and then the percent of the budget to actual. And then in column L, we have our projected, where I think that we're gonna land at the end of the fiscal year, and whether it's favorable to the budget or not. And then again, just a percentage of the projected amount to be received. So typically I just go through some of the highlights here. So this would be one for our town clerk's office. I'm anticipating that we're gonna come in about $75,000 in excess of budget. We had some increased conveyance fees compared to the same time last year and trending in accordance with last year. So I just took the trending number from the same time last year. Actually, let me unhide that. Or not. Hold on. Technical difficulties. So the 351,933 from this time last year compared to the 432,365 last year, and looking at the same rate, we were pretty much in line with a couple of the higher conveyance fees. So just building that into how we're trending, I came up with my projection of the 727, which would be about $75,000 over what we anticipated.
Sorry, Amy, you said that's mostly the conveyance fee? And what was the conveyance fee budgeted at?
I can tell you.
Conveyance fees are a real estate line item, right? So if they're
Correct.
going up, either there's more real estate changing hands or our fees per exchange is bigger, or both? Do we know? Both.
So 470 was what we budgeted. So we had if I look back, if I remember correctly, we had a pretty steady month to month deposit into the conveyance fees, and then we had, I think it was 2 that were higher than the rest. So perhaps like some larger property purchases that had increased conveyance. Moving on down to our tax department,
I have a quick question on the IT line
Sure.
for fiscal 25.
Mhm.
The almost half the what happened with the variance?
the 94,000.
The 85,586, which is for 25.
Let's see.
This variance as of this time in the year.
Last year.
Oh, okay, got it.
Right, so typically the Board of Ed pays us quarterly for our services to them, which is what this line item represents. So so for half the year, this would be half the budget.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amy, as we go into sort of budget planning, the conveyance fee and building permits are 2 of the biggest numbers in our non-tax. And our conveyance fees have varied from what we budgeted to actuals. We budgeted anywhere from 400 and our top actual was 677. How do you budget for conveyance fees. How do you think about that? Do you do a 5-year average? Do you look at market?
So Trish comes up with that number. I'm not sure how she comes up with it, but I can tell you during our budget meeting that Mark has his own analysis of that number and negotiates what it should be.
I think it's fair to say, Chair, that in the past, it's been looking at past trends. And we think that, at least I think at this point, that given market volatility, certain other macroeconomic things, that we now have the resources in-house to make slightly better predictions as to what that conveyance tax will be. You'll see this addressed in the town manager budget submitted to the Board of Selectmen in February. And we'll have a description as to what that number is and what the analysis is at that time. But clearly, it's driven largely by interest rates and obviously by property conveyance, so.
Yes, I would think that perhaps we're seeing conveyances going down across the nation. And then we do have trend analysis, so if you could just, when you present it, do a trends in local receipt report for us, if you're gonna change the assumptions, because we've generally been budgeting. Last year we budgeted 470, we're estimating it's gonna come in 545. 1 year we budgeted 450, it came in at 560. 1 year we budgeted 600, it came in at 618. 1 year we budgeted 500 and it came in at 450. So we're gonna wanna see the trends analysis and how you came up with your estimate.
Is the trend analysis, you want one that is regional or one that's national? What, I'm not sure I understand.
I wanna understand the 5-year history of budget to actuals.
So my trend analysis is gonna focus on the fact that 4 out of the 5 years we've under budgeted and overperformed in that. That's the trend analysis I would be looking at. That's certainly what I've looked at in my preliminary budget discussions with staff. We've, for the most part, with the one exception, we've underestimated that line pretty consistently, I think, is what's jumped out at us at this point.
So you would take an average of the actuals?
I'm not sure that an average of that number works like it might work for estimating the tax collection rate, for example. The discussion at the staff level is this isn't a type of budget line where you would use a 3-year moving average. When you have the ability to look at the global economics and macroeconomics and what the Fed is doing and other things. So that clearly wasn't done in the past, and that's why this budget line is jumped out at me as being poorly budgeted in the past. Now, I'm not prepared to have that discussion tonight, but as Amy says, in preliminary meetings with staff, we're taking a look at that number. And the number that I put in the budget will be defensible. I don't have a number or I'd share it with you, but I would not agree with your characterization that current events mean we should budget less when we're consistently missing. We're not making the number there, so we're taking a look at it.
Okay, so I would say we would like to see the analysis and the assumptions.
Yeah, and I would just say for the record, you and I had this conversation at the meeting with Wendy previously where I indicated to you, Chair, that it was my intention to take a look at this, and so this may be new to your colleagues, but we had that conversation, you and I, last week.
That's why I'm bringing it up publicly.
I just wanna make sure your colleagues knew that we had that
Yes.
conversation.
As well as building permit fees. So can you talk about how you think about
With
building
respect,
permit
Chair,
fees?
we had that conversation just to have an informal discussion about what the town manager was thinking about preliminarily. And you're bringing it up in a public session and before I finalized and
Just wanna give people a heads up that
we
you're
don't
looking at it.
anticipate any change to the building permit revenue line unless the Director of Planning and Development indicates to me that he believes that there will be a settlement to active litigation involving a major development that could impact that line significantly. And so the issue for budgeting has to do with the position of the town in that litigation, and I'm just not prepared to get into it.
That's totally fine. I think it is important for a policy discussion for this board. If you have a one-time boost in building permit fees, just conceptually, we talked about having a structurally balanced budget, so recurring revenues can support the operating budget, one-time revenue should support one-time expenditures.
And I would say, Chair, with respect that while I agree with that, I think we also discussed in that meeting that it's incumbent upon me to provide a recommended budget to the Board of Selectmen that is the best predictor of actual outcomes, not a budget that raises the mill rate and ends up at the end of the year with $3, $4, or even $5 million surplus. And so it's important to me that we get these revenue numbers right. The building fees are an important number. If that is settled and we get an 830G, hundreds of units could come in. We could miss that line. Meanwhile, I've cut the budget elsewhere. So those were the discussions that we had, which I'm happy to make public if you wanna put them on the agenda.
No, I'm just saying, from our perspective, we have a policy that says structurally balanced budget. So recurring revenues support the operating budget, one-time revenues support one-time expenditures. So we just ask you to budget it
I
consistent with that
So I think
policy.
what I'm hearing is us trying to figure out loud if the changes that may come in these building related line items to the budget are going to be changed. On what basis are we going to change them on? And I'm hearing Lisa be concerned that we would make a change based on what may be either a one-time change in a specific property and or be based on assumptions that aren't gonna hold in this weird environment that we're in. What I'm hearing Mark say is you seem like you've got some comfort in the analysis that you plan to go do to come up with those. And I think you also hear Lisa's concern that we're gonna take a one-time blip and turn it into a thing.
Yeah, I only object to the characterization that we would take the one-time blip, because let's say you increase the building revenue fees based on the expectation that you're gonna get that one-time blip. It's how you use it. I agree with the chair that you use it for one time. So for example, you would use it for capital, or maybe you would use it for debt service repayment. I don't think there's any disagreement at all. I just don't wanna feel like I'm boxed out of increasing the revenue line, which in and of itself is transparent to our taxpayers.
No, just
Okay.
where it's applied.
Well, the implication is that we shouldn't raise the revenue line because it's one-off. But if I'm hearing you, the issue is how you spend the additional revenue. There is no disagreement at all. It's just that I do intend to change revenue lines when I can justify it to the boards.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's fair.
In my personal life, I call that we are violently agreeing with each other.
I think we are.
So it sounds like, okay,
Yeah,
making sure.
totally agree with the
Love it.
chair on this one.
Okay,
Thank you.
just alright, so we've got that clarified. Alright, Amy, you wanna continue?
Sure. The tax department, so this is consistent year over year. The 700,000 is a placeholder. We typically budget our tax collection rate at 98.5%. We typically come in at about 99.5%. We will have a better idea where that number is gonna land after our January collections. And we can narrow down what increase we are expecting to have, but the budget, the projection in there is just based on the tax collection rates that we built in.
Amy, if we were, we assume 98.5 and we're closer to 99.5, we would expect the projections to be higher than 700. Can you talk about what's going on there, Ben?
So I just put it as a placeholder because although the projection for just the tax collection rate is gonna be higher than the 700,000, we also have prior year collections that don't always come to fruition, that's standard 280. And then our motor vehicle supplementals that go out, I haven't gotten a final on what that was yet and what the collection rate was related to those. So it's just a conservative number for right now in case those don't come to fruition.
And if I could add, Chair, too, from my perspective on this, two other points. One is that Board of Selectmen just recently approved a rather large tax appeal that may have an impact on next year's taxes, and also there is the property that is the subject of the solar application has back taxes as well that are contributing to a very slightly lower tax collection rate than historically. So we've come to the understanding and agree with the conservative budgeting, but there are a couple of things that I think maybe haven't quite circulated to your board yet. One was the tax appeal, and the other is the ongoing delinquency of that rather large tax bill, which I think now with the past due is over 300,000.
So there's a chance that we'll get that, you mean?
Well, I think you get it, it's as prior year when we go to tax sale or something, I was talking to the town attorney about that just recently, so we'll have more for you on that. I mean, we are going to enforce the taxes then, so maybe going to a tax sale.
Mark, how do you have you tracked or thought about, there's been a post revaluation, there was an unusually large amount of appeals, understandably so. Have you tracked the total amount and what that means for lost revenue to the town?
I have, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm happy to share that with the board. You know, it's very informative to look at that because you've got a reval coming in a couple of years.
Exactly.
I know you and I are in lockstep on the worry about the effect of the reval shifting values, not so much the total grand list, but the distribution, particularly between commercial and residential. So happy to share you that. We'll be looking at it a lot more as we get closer to the upcoming reval, which is 2 years away.
I know when Francine did her estimate, her initial estimate on the amount of appeals was lower than what actually turned out to be. So when we say, why is the grand list not where we think it is, it may have something to do with the appeals.
I think it's interesting because when we budget and we do these things conservatively, our minds, I wasn't an assessor, I was a tax collector, but I've known many assessors that underestimate the value, the potential value lost as a result of all of the tax appeals that come. And I don't know whether that's just inherent to the position, no offense to our assessor, I'm sure, but if I would inflate that number, and I do in my mind for budgeting purposes, and assume that the losses to tax appeal shifts are gonna be more significant.
Yeah, that's what I would think as well. So it'd be, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you for getting that to
Glad to
us.
Moving on to the next highlight under Board of Education. Here we're showing a $96,000 coming in under budget by $96,000. I think part of that might end up being timing. I'm looking into that. I'm not sure if it's gonna be the full 96, but we did lose 2 tuitioned in students, one from Heartland and one from Granby, so that will come in under. I'm just not sure if that 96,000 is gonna hold. And then our insurance refunds, this is something that comes from our KERMA member distribution. They have a pool, if their pool looks good, they like to give back to their members. We didn't have one, I think 2 years ago, but they have reinstated the program, and for the last couple of years, since they stopped the program, they have reinstated that program and given us our annual distribution. So with that, general fund revenue is anticipated to come in over budget by about $835,000 at this point in time.
What percent is that of the budgeted number?
0.65.
0.65. So when we talk about 835,000, that is a large number, but if you think about in as a percentage to coming back close to the budget, I think that's actually a pretty good budget.
Yeah.
We have
So
an
under
obligation not to
1%.
come in under deficit, that is a very dangerous thing. And so to come in with projections of under 1%, that's good budgeting, so nice job.
So it's great.
Moving on to expenditures. So you'll see that there's several lines in here that say pending transfer from contingency. This is something that you all will take a look at next month with your mid-year transfers. So the contracts that have been settled and the unaffiliated pay increases have been completed. That money was sitting in contingency and will be allocated to the various departments. And once that allocation is done, this pending transfer will be changed. So it'll no longer be pending, it'll show in a positive.
So will that change anything from, or has that been budgeted into that number already?
It's been budgeted down here. What's it part of? Here we go. So if you look at your contingency reserve of this 264,493, so we're just gonna take this for the settlements and reallocate them above to the individual departments. And then
Does the contingency after settlement, they get reallocated, that'll be in transfers in February. After budgets have been settled, negotiations. So it's not technically an under budget there,
Okay.
it's just budgeted in two different lines.
Right. So those reallocations will be completed next month. The only thing, a couple things, so right now the police department has several vacancies. We feel like there's probably gonna be 3 pending at the end of the fiscal year, which will translate to savings of about $300,000. So that's why the police department is anticipated to come under budget by about $320,000.
It's a little more than that when you add in benefits, I assume, right?
Right, it would just be a different line, correct? Actually, speaking of which, we go down here to the employee benefits is about $100,000 in savings for benefits related to the police department vacancies.
So Amy, we have 5 vacancies in the police department currently, and we're anticipating ending the year with 3. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
The chief is more optimistic than he is.
Yeah, I mean, when I hesitate that long, the answer is there's a mismatch between the department head and your town manager. I'm not gonna say more than that, but I'm less of an optimist than the chief is vis-a-vis our experience filling positions. I also have information on the HR side about absences and potential retirements and other things that Amy may not be reporting to the Board of Finance. So I don't wanna get out in front of my skis on that. But I would say, and I briefed the first selectman, that if you have 6 vacancies, if that were the case, going into the next fiscal year, I do not believe we can fill those positions given the current state of affairs. So we're taking a close look at that, Chair,
So
vis-a-vis next year's budget.
So would you, the way I think about it, I'm wondering if you think about it the same way, if that's a temporary blip in vacancies, I assume we're not gonna have 6 vacancies every year, right? So would you take that savings and then maybe budget a one-time capital expense for that and keep the positions?
Not necessarily, but I think you're on the right track and I don't think we'd be that far apart. I would say this, that in my first year budget, we had a vacancy in police. I did nothing other than factor it into the town-wide vacancy factor which pre-existed my arrival. We made no changes to the vacancy factor and we just let it ride and we turned in a multi-million-dollar surplus that partly was contributed to by police vacancies. In my second budget, I questioned staff more diligently and wrestled with this a little bit more. And in consultation with the finance director, the fix was to jigger the vacancy rate globally slightly with Board of Finance buy-in. I believe we made a relatively minor change to the vacancy factor. The vacancy factor is, as you all know, just I call it a contra expense account, but it's a credit to the expense without killing the position, right? So the budget captures that factor. In my review in the second year I was here, I felt that the vacancy factor was too low, that it had been budgeted consistently a little bit too conservatively and we could no longer afford to do that. Not a major thing. This coming budget cycle, the gloves are off. This is, if you have 6 vacancies, the vacancy factor method of accounting for this works globally when you believe you can fill the positions. If you've got 9 vacancies across the organization and they, for the most part, can always be filled and you expect them to be filled, taking a vacancy factor of 3 or 2 makes sense. But in police, where you know that you cannot and are unlikely to fill 6 because of the recruiting problems, then it becomes a different kettle of fish. So I'm not sure that the global vacancy factor is sufficient to address it. And we're still having those discussions. I met with the police chief last week on this issue. And we certainly, I think there's an agreement, I don't wanna speak for the chief, but I think there's an agreement that it's okay to budget for 3 vacancies and have a vacancy factor. But it's not okay to budget for 6 when you know you can't fill, and that number's a negotiation too, whether it's 3 or 4, I really don't know. Because in that case, you're budgeting for money that you know you were never gonna spend in that fiscal year.
Yeah, so I think of it as similar to the thing, if you have an unusual vacancy rate one year, you can certainly budget a higher vacancy rate, but it's not gonna be year to year that same thing. So the unusual part, you might use that for a one-time expenditure, like a cash for capital or something like that.
Right, or you might alleviate your use of cash reserve. Yeah, we've got some interesting things coming up in the budget, and again, it's early days, but the Board of Selectmen has got to weigh in on a request from an outside agency to support the capital purchase of another ambulance for SVAA. We are awaiting some guidance from the Board of Selectmen on that and a number of other issues that will guide our, to your point. But, I know that it would create a cliff, but I also know that cutting the positions, and this my view, I'm just speaking for myself, I think if you cut the position, say you were to cut 3 cops, you were sending a message to the public that you don't need them, as opposed to the recruiting timeline is twice as long or 3 times as long. So I'm reluctant to cut it, and I'm obviously reluctant to budget for it at this high
So
level.
budgeting then, if you keep the positions, you don't fund them, you could use that savings to fund the ambulance for 1 year.
And that is one of the things we're talking about, Chair.
So those are the kind of one-time expenditures and then figure out what to do with it.
And I think if you, I would say this, everything, it's a closed cycle. So we are in agreement, except that I don't want there to be a disconnect if we in fact agree that you would use that for a one time. My view is gonna be that reduces the need to request more in cash reserves to fund, say, CNR. And that therefore I've got more available on that side of the
That's right.
equation. I think we get to where you're saying, and we're just saying the same thing as we were before. But I wanna be clear that we're it's a very tight budget, as you know, and we're looking at everything, including vacancy factor. And there's no question that the vacancy factor has been under budgeted in Simsbury, and that's just the number, it's not me saying it. So we're
Which
taking.
marks some history, it was never budgeted at all, that was
Well,
until
even
3
worse.
years ago, yeah.
Even worse, because I think then you're asking your taxpayers to fund vacant positions. It's one thing if you can get them, if you can hire them and retain them. But in this unique landscape that is police recruiting, it's unique to police and maybe CDLs. We're starting to have that problem in DPW with CDL drivers, frankly. Then you have to take a look at the vacancy factors.
I will give credit to a former Board of Finance member, that was an initiative of Linda Schofield who started budgeting the vacancy factor. And we did not have good analysis, so we've been slowly trying to figure out what it is.
Right, and that's to my earlier point, if you're looking at things like the conveyance tax and other things, it's okay to say that now we have the resources to take, more a different approach than just looking at what the 3-year moving averages or what the last 4 years have been, but to actually take a look at the economics and have that discussion. And I'm glad we were able to do that.
Do you have a sense of what an appropriate vacancy rate may be based on?
I do. I would not at this point recommend further tweaking the global vacancy rate that's since last year's minor adjustment applies to all departments. What we're leaning towards doing is pulling police out of that calculation and doing a separate vacancy factor for PD that factors in its calculation and analysis the recruiting timeline and pipeline for officers. And in that case, you'd take 6 vacancies and say, and we haven't settled on this, but 2 of them cannot be funded at all. The third one could be funded for a half a year, for example. And rather than defunding the expense line, you increase the contra expense account credit to the expense. So the negotiation, and I call it that because I take the chief's recommendation very seriously. And what he thinks is what it is in terms of the recruitment. I'm simply challenging the chief to be realistic about the recruitment and we've gotta increase that vacancy factor. And I expect that the boards of selectmen and your board wouldn't want me to mess with the vacancy factor townwide any further than I did last year. But I hope I can make the case to carve out police. Subject to how you use that money, of course, but I think it's an important thing because 3 cops, roughly salaries,
Like 110 apiece.
so 330 before benefits, right? Fringe 25, say 30%. You know, you could be looking at $400,000 in net relief to the operating budget. And while you don't wanna create a cliff, we're looking for innovative ways to capture that, harvest that savings. And that would be the mill rate relief that all of you have asked me to find.
So I guess my hesitancy is not to create those cliffs, so you have those savings, use it for a one-time capital expense, meet other needs with it for the one time. Unless you're gonna consistently have 2 cops not unfunded.
Yeah, I think that actually that's where we'll go in the next conversation is because I think kind of like the difference between operating and CNR, we do see this recruiting issue in PD lasting for more than one cycle. So you're right, Jared, it may be 2 or 3 years of this, it's hard to see where it ends, especially, I mean, I don't see anything improving, but
Yeah, so we're saying the same thing. If it's gonna be a consistent number, the vacancy rate, you can budget it consistently. If it's a vacancy rate with a big vacancy one year, don't change it, just fill that
Right.
gap with a one-time cost.
But the interesting thing is let's say, just in my analysis, you've got 6, you think you can't fill 3. And so you say it's 3 this year. Is it not gonna be 3 next year? Well, that's driven not just by whether the recruitment pipeline speeds up, as we hope it will, but it's also driven by retirements. And I don't know that this was done when you were first selectman, but I can tell you what we're doing now. We're looking at age and years of service of our cops, and we're looking at not their estimation of when they might retire, but our estimation of when they might retire. And we're taking a more strategic approach to budgeting for that. So it may very well be that this does not create a cliff, but that you could expect there to be a number of vacancies every year in PD.
Yeah, so that's just the analysis. If you could just put that in writing, that analysis, so
Happy to
we
do
can
it.
see it.
Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
Great,
That's good.
okay. Amy?
Yeah.
You wanna keep going? Sorry, we interrupted you.
And thank you for explaining that. That was really good.
The debt service is probably the last area estimated coming in under budget by about $395,000. So our last debt service issuance, we were able to do a couple of things. We knew we were having project closeouts at the end of the fiscal year related to one large project for Henry James, and we had a couple other bonded projects that showed some savings. So if you have a bonded project that has savings, you can reallocate those funds to other approved bonded projects. You cannot reallocate them to a reserve fund, so to speak, or other projects that are cash funded, things of that nature. So at the end of fiscal year 25, you may recall during my year-end results that we had, I think it was about 4 million or so, largely related to the Henry James project that was able to be reallocated. So we were able to reallocate some for the fiscal year 25 issuance, and then we were able to reallocate some for fiscal year 26. So we no longer have to bond to anything for fiscal year 26, and then anything left over, I believe it was about $1 million, will be allocated towards fiscal year 27 approved bonded projects. That's the cause for the principal. The interest, we had taken a look at our cash flow. We typically go out to bond in the spring. However, the interest rates were quite high during that time, and we were anticipating them starting to come down. So I took a look at our cash flow, and our bond advisor had looked to see if we should hold for a little bit to see what interest rates we're gonna do. And luckily the interest rate started to come down, so by delaying the issuance, we were able to save about $200,000 on our interest.
Is that the guidance that you're getting from where is guidance coming from on the interest rate?
So I mean, it's market, it's paying attention to what the feds are doing. They'll weigh in on, so our bond advisor will send me when they close out a bond issuance, he'll send me the results from another town and let me know the rating of the town and what interest rate they received. So around that time, he'll start to send me. So in the spring, he started to send me what was closing around us and the interest rate. And then we knew it was high and we knew it was gonna start to come down. We had an inkling that it was gonna start to come down. So that's when we looked at our cash flow and like, can we afford to hold off for a little bit longer?
And these are floating rate bonds, or are they fixed?
Fixed.
They're fixed.
Okay. So how does the interest rate change if it's fixed?
Because we sell the bonds to
Oh, I see, okay, got it.
yeah, we sell the bonds to several banks bid on the bonds. So it's basically an auction for our bonds and then they the banks come in with their best and final offer
Got it.
because they're all competing for each other. And so as the interest rates come down, they're basically giving us a market rate
Yeah, that's right.
based on what they think.
So
that
this
they-
is on the secondary market, you just manage the interest rate accordingly.
Right.
Okay.
So Amy, the last 1 million that we have that was returned, when you say we can apply to the 2027, bless you, just for members of the public, there is a very strange sound going on in this
It's
room
like
right now.
a waterfall, it's
Yes.
like this water
So
therapy.
if the water
No idea
comes
what it is.
bursting
Probably
through, we'll know why.
Have we budgeted anything for the plumbing in this building?
I think our esteemed DPW commissioner remotely turned the heat up in response to a text, because I saw we were, and so that we understand that,
So we're
sometimes
not
I
gonna
will.
complain about the sound.
Well, I wasn't
That's
just
right.
playing words with friends, I was, so I think that may be, but
Okay.
sorry.
But Amy, that last 1 million, we have projected the amount to go out to bond 5 million, so that would enable us to go out to bond next year at 4 million instead.
Right.
By applying that. The other option would be to go out to 6 million, just keep the 5 and do the 6. So I think our board should probably give some thought, when we do the budget modeling, which way we wanna go. We're trying to get borrowing down to that debt service line at the 8 million or even to 7 million so that we can create some capacity there over time for the major debt issuance when we do squadron at some point. So that may be one point of decision, which Mark, you would probably like some guidance on before you do your budget. You like-
Not at all, Chair, I don't need any guidance on that one.
Yeah.
I would just say, that the guidance is 10 million every 2 years.
Right.
Or 5 million every year, and that's up to us. And so if 1 million is swept back and unused or whatever, that's what it is. So I would say that with respect, the board would be changing the guidance if you said to drop from 5 to 4, because so.
No, we would say it's still the 5 million, but we're gonna use the found money for one of those million.
Yeah,
the
that
guidance would be
wouldn't
the
be my
same.
interpretation of your existing guidance.
So I would say we will give you then updated guidance. Just to make sure, because that was always our intent when we did the last, as you'll recall, our bond council thought that was a good way to apply the dollars. The question is, what are we trying to accomplish? And trying to get debt service down.
From my perspective, we're trying to satisfy the guidance of 10 million every 2 years, and if we don't need 1 million, it would be a sea change for the board to now say you're surrendering it and you can only borrow at 9 million every 2 years. That-
Right, you're still spending the money, you've got the extra million, it's the same amount.
Well, I defer to my finance director on that, but
It's the same dollar.
under the
amount.
charter, it's the town manager budget, and at the moment, the draft capital plan is capturing the million and saying that we're within guidance to bond for 6, I think, instead of 5. I mean, I don't have that in front of me, but with all of the competing interests in FY 26-27, our charge is to stay within the guidance of this board. If the finance director says I got 1 million to the good, I got 1 million to the good, unless the board changes the guidance, and that is what this would be.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just,
So that's one of the things we'll go through when we do our modeling. Just as a reminder to the public, when we give our guidance, it is preliminary guidance, and as we look at conditions and as they change, the guidance does get updated, it's not set in stone.
We are about to have a conversation about the increase in the estimation for the grant list growth, Chair, so I'll remind you that you said that when we
Absolutely.
report grant list growth 3 times higher than what you and I talked about previously.
No, we just got the update, it's not 3 times higher.
It's just under 1 million now, 900,000 I think, but I don't wanna jump ahead of us, but if what you're
Sorry,
saying.
is this conversation about, hey, if we got $1 million less in the bonding we just had to go do, does it go back into OpEx or CapEx?
No, what it is how much are we bonding next year if we've got a bond, if we can only bond 10 million every 2 years, can we capture that savings or not?
Yeah, and so then you could still spend the equivalent, but you only need to bond 9 because you've got 1 million in savings.
Sorry, I can't tell if we're violently agreeing again or if there's.
We usually are.
They're not this time.
Okay.
I did wanna hear that expression again, but when we gave the initial guidance, when we adopted this policy of $10 million every 2 years, it wasn't because there was something magic about the numbers, it was because we had this goal of maintaining or stabilizing debt service over time, and that was before we started hearing rumbling from the Board of Education about
Fair point.
Henry James, or rather Squadron Line.
Squadron line.
So it all works together.
I couldn't agree more with that, Bert, I really could, but I've got to just say, that from a staff level, 10 million every 2 years is what you can borrow. And that guidance hasn't changed since it was issued, so it's not like any superseding event has ever happened that it hasn't been changed, it's been there for coming up on 2.5 years now that we've been living with it, and that's the guidance. If it's gonna change when things happen, that's fine, that's the board's prerogative, I need to know that because we're trying to do a 5 or 6 year capital plan that I need to meet the guidance.
Absolutely, that's why we wanted to have this conversation today, that's why we do updated guidance in January. But just the guidance, to your point, I think, just to clarify, the guidance was 10 million every 2 years for the whole CIP plan.
Correct.
And so the question is, if you have an opportunity to reduce some borrowing, should we take that?
Of course.
And so then we do just violently agree then, because that is all we're saying. You have an opportunity, 1 million, you don't need to borrow the 10 million, you can borrow the 9.
I think the issue,
Debt down.
but with respect, Chair, our conversation went deeper. Our conversation went to the possibility that the Board of Ed will add Squadron Line, $100+ million to the capital plan next year, next week, next month. Your concern is the same as mine. And the issue is because we know that may happen, we have to start planning for it now by saving some of our cash reserves, by lowering our debt service costs to prepare for that, right? So because of that, I don't have things in year 3 and 4 and 5 in my capital plan because I know you don't want me to because of the potential for Squadron Line, which means if I don't get them in year 1 or year 2, we're not getting them at all. Those are critical pieces of equipment. That $1 million of bonding in fiscal 26-27 is critical to your own mission about taking pressure off years 3 and 4 in anticipation of Squadron Line. It's a closed cycle. And if you pull on one string, it unravels another string. So for me, I need to know, and we have a meeting with the superintendent and the chairman of the Board of Education scheduled with the first selectman tomorrow at noon to drill down on whether the Board of Ed's planning on Squadron Line or not, because as I sit here tonight, I don't know the answer to that question. But the million is important to my year 1 of the upcoming capital plan because the Board of Ed is 2.6 or 2.8, 2.6. If it's 5, I've got 2.4. If it's 6, I've got 3.4.
Well, you do have 6, you're gonna bond for 2.4 and then use cash for the 1.
But we only have 5 in cash reserves and you don't wanna use it all. We can't. My budget isn't gonna propose using.
Now, bonding is different than cash reserves.
Oh, I understand that, but if I don't bond for it, what am I paying cash for? The capital that Mr. Roy needs in DPW. How am I paying for it in 27?
Are you talking CIP or are you talking CNR?
Well, let's just say one and the same, the equipment, how am I paying for it?
So there are two ways you're gonna pay for the equipment. You can use the traditional payback, the general fund, you can use TAR, you can use LoSiP, you can use capital reserves. The 1 million that Amy is talking about that was turned back is not technically capital reserves because it has to be designated towards a bonded project, so it can't be used for CNR.
Okay.
Is that correct, according to bond
That's
counsel?
correct.
Okay, so that has nothing to do with CNR, that just goes to whether you bond, so it has to be applied to a bonded project. So that means you can take the 5 million you were planning on bonding, we have to apply it to a bonded project. The CIP shows 5 million, we can apply 1 million of that, so you bond for 4 million and you get 1 million off that you don't have to bond for, CIP only. Doesn't impact CNR, it's
And
not,
why-
doesn't
why-
impact the
Why
capital
couldn't we bond
reserves.
for 5 and or 6 and I mean, I must be missing something, cause you sound like this is pretty straightforward, so my apologies, but
Amy, what am I missing? Is that, this is how it was described by bond counsel, what, am I saying it wrong?
Well, he's just saying that you're using the 5 million every 2 years and taking the $1 million off, so then it would end up being 9 million. He wants to do 11 million, take the $1 million off, and he still gets his 10 million every 2 years.
Right.
thank you, yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. I wanna meet the guidance of the board, but I think we should be able to capture that on the bonding side as opposed to notwithstanding the need to get the total debt service cost down as a percentage of the total budget. I mean, I get all of that. But the problem is that we've got, I don't have it in front of me, maybe 40 million of unfunded capital needs that department heads are pitching for, and these aren't nice to haves, these are further delays in some of the capital purchases, I'm not talking about building roofs even, will start to cost us more than the interest cost on not bonding for them because of the anticipated inflationary effects of the delay. So if you gotta get a new plow truck and it's $300,000 today, you gotta assume it's gonna be $360,000 by the time you're able to fit it in later. And so our capital plan is starting to analyze what is the cost of delay. And we need to be able, because at some point, we're gonna ask the board, I don't think we can sustain 10 million every 2 years indefinitely. That's why in our meeting, Chair, I was asking, is that guidance for 1 cycle or is it for 6 cycles? Because
For the 5-year CIP.
well, that was not my understanding and
Right.
you've clarified your interpretation of that. But from our perspective at the staff level, the Board of Finance issues guidance every year. Once a year you issue guidance. And so every year we anticipate guidance. Why would the guidance be for the next 6 years? In other words,
Because you have to do a CIP every year.
I know that, but you also have to account for things like grand list growth and other things that we are reasonably able to put our finger on, right? So that's a part of the budget, but I've got 40 million in unfunded capital needs and we're struggling with that. We're all on the same page.
So I guess I would say to you, I think what I'm hearing is we actually do need what Lee Erdman recommended. He said we needed a 20-year plan. If we're gonna do a 20-year investment, we need to make sure that the squadron line is not squeezing out all of the needs you have. And the only way to do that is to take a 20-year look. So I know we funded, the master plan, looking at all our capital. The idea in funding it was, we were told at the time, this is what we need to do a major long-term plan. But now I'm hearing that you don't have the resources to do a 20-year plan. So I guess I would say to you, one thing to think about is what resources do you need to put together a 20-year plan that would incorporate squadron line so that we can take a look, and maybe I would encourage you to budget that so that when squadron does come, we can take a look at it in a 20-year span, to your point, Mark, to make sure that in passing squadron, we have not squeezed out every other need of the town and are left in a position where we can't fund anything.
Yeah, these are good points, and I think, maybe a discussion, at a workshop meeting, I know time is short. I would just correct you on one thing, I believe my predecessor, the interim town manager, Lee Erdman, was looking at a 10-year plan, not a 20-year plan, so just wanted to clarify that.
He had
When
told
I-
me 20,
Yeah,
but
he
He did a 12-year plan,
was
didn't he?
thinking 12, okay. One of the things we realized early on was because of the extraordinary costs associated with the inflation that was relatively new at that time, right? Post-COVID inflation. You know, a 12-year plan just wasn't realistic, and the preliminary drawings of specs of that plan also didn't capture correctly the potential inflationary costs. It was my view that the 12-year plan, as it was being prepared, would not have been worth the paper it was written on. So I pulled the plug on that myself when I became town manager and said, not that we wouldn't revisit having longer strategic planning once we get a handle on the 5 or 6 year plan, right? So what I did, Chair, was I went back and I looked at the town's 6-year capital plans for the last 10 years. And we should have that conversation offline about how accurate historically, and I don't want to cast any aspersions, obviously, but it was, from a budgeting perspective, weak, I would say, in terms of being a predictor of what the town actually did. Roughly, some of those specs were, and this was just back of the envelope, 8 out of 10 projects didn't happen in the year that they were budgeted for. 3 out of 10 projects never happened at all, even though they were in the plan. You and Amy, for modeling purposes, cannot use a capital plan for modeling for debt service costs and everything else that's so important if the plan itself isn't accurate, if the plan is not an accurate depiction of what we're going to need when and how much is it going to cost. And respectfully, the idea that we just extend what we're currently doing 6 years and make it 12 years or 20 years when we haven't yet proven a capability in this building to do a 6-year plan made no sense to me, and it doesn't make sense to me now.
So I guess I would say to you, what resources do you need to do good capital planning? And if we can't do a 6-year plan, why are we investing in a 20-year project?
Well, that's great questions and a good conversation. I think we do have the resources to do a really good capital plan, and hopefully each year I've been here, it'll get better. This one is better than last year's, that's for sure. I also made a pitch to the Charter Revision Commission, which I believe they might have actually recommended to, or will recommend, that the capital plan go from 6 to 5 in the charter. And my analysis, I'm sure you've seen that letter to the Charter Revision Commission, was let's first make sure that a shorter period is accurate. And you know, the longer you go out, the more you can give yourself a little leeway to maybe not be accurate in year 15 or 16. But we've got to get years 1 through 5 right. But to your earlier point, where I do agree with you, on the Board of Ed side, where you've got school construction or reconstruction projects in the hundreds of millions of dollars, that's a separate, see, that's a problem, right? That's something that should be known much earlier and that, I know that the charter makes the capital plan the responsibility of the town manager. But with respect, we need guidance from the Board of Ed, from the superintendent. Your town manager, as I sit here today, you know more than I do about whether we need a squadron line rebuilt or, you know, and I have no idea. The superintendent, I think, has got a plan, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, with Tecton and others, has the resources at the Board of Ed side to answer those questions for what the board's needs are gonna be. And I don't wanna speak for our first selectman, we're gonna have that conversation with the superintendent.
Yeah, I think the challenge is gonna be, there are gonna be more needs than there are gonna be resources to
Well,
meet
there's no
those
question
needs.
about that.
And so the question is, how do we prioritize and meet the best needs of both the town and the schools? And so what resources do you, like, we can talk about what we can afford, we can model that, and Amy's done a great model, and we can get to that. It is not gonna be able to fund everything, 40
Yeah.
million and the 130.
Right.
So the question is, how do you plan for that? And we need a good CIP. I know, Lalitha, you were just at CCM, what did they say how long the CIP should be?
Well, so the way they had, I went in for a training session, and so the CIP was 5, 10 and 15 years. Now in business, that's what I know so far, is that we do 20-year planning, knowing fully well that 15 to 20, the 15th to 20th year is probably just it's a castle. It's a hope and a prayer. But we do need to model that, because that's what gives us a general direction as to where we're going, and then we got to tweak it every so many years. The plans from year 1 to year 3 are solid. You can't diverge from that.
That's right.
Like 3 to 5 can be tweaked at year 2, So 1 to 5 has to be solid.
Yeah.
Then 5 to 10 is something that needs to be looked at, knowing that 1 to 5 gets us to 5 to 10.
Right.
And then from there on. But you know, to your point, when you know you have a school remodeling that's coming up that's very large, and you have, you know, all these other life continues situations, I think it's really worth for us to have that kind of visibility, because 20 years will be here tomorrow. And we need to start looking at that now, knowing fully well that you know, after you get beyond year 5, it's going to start getting hazy. But I think we can do a 1 to 5 quite solidly and
We're
stick.
working on that right now.
Yeah, and then I think after that, we can start looking at the bigger projects, but Squadron 9's a big project.
Well, the good news is, I always wanna end on good news, Chair, and that is I don't have $100 million project on the municipal side. It's Squadron Line is the only one we're aware of, and we don't know yet when that would be in the plan. So I defer to our colleagues, you know, at the Board of Ed on that, and to the first selectman. But back to the million, you know, I defer to guidance from the board, but
Well, when we do the modeling, we can go through that.
Yeah.
But I guess where we are, I mean, my comfort level of approving a $20 million bond project at an amount that is 3-4 times higher than we've ever done without a long-term plan makes me very uncomfortable. So I guess I would say to you, what resources do you need to develop that plan? So that they can be coincide. I personally would be uncomfortable approving Squadron without more than a 5-year plan on capital, because I wanna understand the impact.
Absolutely. And my understanding is
So-
Tecton and others, you know, there'll be a lot of people at the table with that. I'll have that conversation tomorrow.
Yeah.
I
And
just
something that's in, you know, in layman's terms, so that the public also knows what it is that we're looking to achieve and what the timeline is. I think we get caught, I mean, our job is to go into the details and into the technical terms, but something that's a little bit, that's more easy for people who don't.
digestible.
Yeah, who don't have to do this kind of work, and I mean, we do it for them. And so that would be very useful.
Glad to
You
do it.
know, and if you have $100 million project that nobody knows about, that's a very bad thing, so you wanna make sure that it's properly communicated.
Yeah, you just don't want it to show up. We haven't been talking about it, and we've had these 5-year plans and it shows up quickly. That is an uncomfortable situation to be in.
Well,
For us.
thankfully, we don't have that, because we are really discussing every single detail here, so these are good discussions to have.
Right, I think we're all in agreement. We worry that that's gonna be put into the capital plan, not next year, but maybe year 3, year whenever, I don't know at this point. But it's a huge undertaking. So,
And a fair plan is one where everybody is equally unhappy. So,
I agree.
Okay, so Amy, we sort of interrupted you.
Sorry, Amy.
Okay. Moving on to the health insurance fund, which we typically highlight.
What page are you on?
I am on page 13. Here you can see our budget. We were expecting a loss of about $451,000, and currently we're projected to be about $316,000 loss, so that is the planned use of fund balance from the prior year. And you can see our expected claims. This is a claims analysis that is done by our broker, and they have actually come up with this 16.5 compared to our budget amount of 16.3. Typically when we do the claims analysis, my estimates are usually different than theirs. However, I think we're pretty close this time, so I'm anticipating that claims will probably be above budget by the end of the fiscal year. One of the items that Lisa wanted me to touch on was the use of reserves. So down here, you'll see that we have our fund balance as of 7/1/25 is $5 million. This is our expected surplus or deficit for the year, and then our estimated fund balance of about 4.6. And then we have claims that have been incurred but not reported, and it is carried on our balance sheet, which gets counted towards our reserve levels. So our total reserve levels are about 5.8 million anticipated as of 6/30/26, and then that translates to 35% of expected claims. So our brokers tell us we should be at 20 to 25% of expected claims. Anything over the 25% mark, we can, or the 20-25% mark, we can use about a third of that funding in order to offset in different areas, operating budget relief, use in the fund, basically anything related to health insurance. So during the tri-board, I had given a reserve balance use of about $1 million. This is something that I just came up with off the top of my head, knowing that we had about 40% of expected claims. So going back, the 40% at the 1/3 use of above the 20 to 25% would have been anywhere from $850,000 to 1.1 million. So that million is in the range of at the 40%. As you can see down here, we're at 35% now. We're anticipated to be at 35% by the end of the fiscal year. So if we do the same math, 20 to 25% of expected claims, and then only take 1/3 of that balance for use, that's anywhere from about $840,000 to about $570,000.
So the question we had for this board, we have new information, does that change our guidance? And I would just like some thoughts first from the finance director, since it will impact our budget, and then from board members on comfort level.
Personally, I'm still comfortable with the million. It's still within the range of the 20 to 25%. There's nothing that we've seen that has been brought to our attention during any of our claims discussions or our stop loss activity that has given me any pause that there's something major coming. Everything that happens towards the end of the year when people are using up their deductibles is timing. So personally, I'm comfortable with the million still, but it's obviously your policy call.
I mean, what does that do for, it will obviously potentially increase a cliff versus the other number when we had higher reserves. How do you think about that?
So we're not in that part of the budget on either side as far as building in the cliffs, but we do have reserves either in the health insurance fund or we have reserves in the general fund, we have our capital reserve fund. So there's plenty of places that we could put a plan in place to accommodate that cliff. Accordingly, obviously increasing our interest or our premiums at a lower rate with offsetting, feathering it in. That's what we had anticipated to do with that $850,000 that we had reserved previously. So if you want a specific plan on how we're going to pay it back if there is a cliff, I would need a little bit of time to come up with that.
Can I get board members' thoughts on this?
How does this actually work? I'm still learning how this the math on this works. Can you explain that to me?
Sure. So our reserve levels are 5.8 million. So our guidance, I'll just use it's 20 to 25%. So if I want to use 25%, we are going to take our expected claims times 25%.
That's our target reserve.
Right,
Okay.
so our reserve levels have to be at 20 to 25%. So on the high side, the 25% is just our expected claims times the 25%. So our reserve level should be at a minimum of 4.1% if we're targeting that 25%.
Okay.
Above and beyond that 25%, if we have money in our reserves, we can utilize some of that money. So if we're targeting at 5.8 million and then we only need to be at 4.1 million, then we have about 1.6 million above and beyond our 20 to 25% of expected claims, which is the guidance our brokers tell us we should be at. So our brokers tell us you can use this 1.6 million, but their recommended usage is usually about a third of this. So if you take the 1.6 times 33 and you get about $550,000 that you can use, and you're still above and beyond the 20 to 25%, but you're taking 1/3 of that usage.
And Lolita, the reason why they do that, having lived through this many years ago, when we used the full amount, it created a huge cliff and then we had to raise health insurance 18% the next year. So this avoids a cliff and it
Sure.
rolls off time to time. When we were doing the 40%, obviously that number was closer to 758. And if you did the 20% target, you hit the million that Amy did. Amy, if you use the 20 target,
Yeah.
what does that do?
What does that do, yeah?
It's about 823,000.
And so that,
And that's what we can use?
Yeah.
Okay.
and that you'll see is I mean, it's only off from Amy's estimate by 150, which in $128 million is considered de minimis. So that, I mean, I can be comfortable with that, but but it's not the 25%, the 560 is kind of a big difference, 450, that starts to get in the material range.
Is
But-
this all good news at the end of the day relative to
that's-
what we've already budgeted?
It's extremely helpful.
So I guess the way I think about it, thinking about the smoothing it out so we don't have a cliff of some sort, why wouldn't you shoot for the 25, because then you still have the 5% you could play with on the back end if you had to.
Because we only budgeted $1 million of it. So we used $1 million offset. If we're targeting the 25, we should have only budgeted 550. So that means either taxes would go up or we would have to ask staff to cut more. So that's sort of the
We don't
downside.
have the 5%, we actually have more than that because we're only using a third over.
Right.
Right. But that's the difference between the 5 and change and the 800, right?
Yes.
What we've done in the past, Amy, remind me if I have this wrong, when we were worried about a cliff, at year end in April when we passed the budget, we took some of the projected savings and we assigned it.
Correct.
And then just so that we were being super cautious, and then once we found that we didn't need it, we then released the assignment and were able to transfer it into capital reserves. So that is another option, dealing with the cliff. I mean, at this point, our finance director says we can accommodate it. We're looking at projections for year end and the 850, so there is money that we would be able to assign. That would mean money that couldn't go into capital reserves, however, but capital reserves is fairly well funded at this point. So it's rolling the dice, but with significant and reasonable,
Cushion behind it, yeah.
yes.
I think at this point, it can stay, but as we get closer, we may wanna take a look at it.
We've got 3 months left,
We
because
still
it's
have-
fiscal to the end of March.
No, the end of June.
June.
Okay.
So
This is halfway
So maybe
through
we
this
can
fiscal.
look at it in March.
So we look at it in April, that's part of the reason we don't pass our budget right away. We look at the last quarterly for just this reason, to see if there's some adjustment we need to make to, if something goes wacky in there. That's when we can make that call, which is why we do the quarterly. I mean, Amy, if you think it's advisable, we could do just the health in March.
I'd love to release some of it if that's Amy's guidance that we got the minimum risk. I do know, I see the insurance activity the last month of the year goes up a lot. So if this is incorporating everything that happened in December, I would think we're more than halfway through the actual risk that we're gonna have a lot of activity on that. I hate waiting and not letting us do anything with that money for another 3 months.
Also, just as an FYI, so when our broker brings us our budgetary estimates for the next year, a lot of it is, what was his word, industry driven or something along those lines. And I push back a little bit because Simsbury claims are typically better than industry driven, but we're still increasing our premiums based on an industry driven amount. So chances are we're going, based on history since I've been here, we're going to be in a better position with that premium increase than what we actually need to be.
So do we have consensus then? We'll keep the recommendation, use the million in reserves. Everybody comfortable with that? No change?
For the next 3 months?
which releases that, some of that money for the team now, right? Am I
Yep.
understanding that?
It's already in our estimate, we've
Yep.
already released it, so it's to maintain the release.
Love it.
It would be 800 for the Board of Ed, 200 for the town.
So I think I'm just being thick. How does the million relate to the 800,000?
So this was, alright, so this was
Thank you, Bert.
yeah, sure.
Bert said it's bigger.
Yeah, it is.
What would we do without you, Bert?
So back during when we had our tri-board meeting and we didn't have this financial information at the time, our expected claims, our reserve balance, a little bit higher than that.
Was it 40% at
Yeah,
that time?
Was at 40%. So if you do the 20%, you're at 3.3. If you do the 25% of expected claims, oops,
It's pulling from the wrong one.
you're at 4.1. And then if you subtract out at the 20%, it's 3.3. You tracked out at the 25%, it's 2.5. And then if you take
Right, exactly.
the overage, you're about $1 million here. At 20%, it's like 1.1 million and 825 there. So I just took a shot in the dark at the meeting, just knowing that we were at 40% of expected claims. I was closer to the 20% side than the 25% side, but that's where the $1 million came in.
Okay.
I know I've asked this question before, but I've forgotten the answer. Why does IBNR increase the amount of the total
I always have the same
reserves?
question.
Because we basically already prepaid those claims. So we have to have a reserve for claims that have, like, people have gone to the doctor, we know they're coming, but we have not physically given the cash yet. So that's also considered as part of our reserve.
Thank you.
Even though it's committed.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing that I get confused with, is it feels like it's committed. It doesn't feel like it's like the rest of
So
the
it is
reserve.
committed, but if you look at our balance sheet, we're showing it like it's already been paid. So then if you look at our income statement, we're paying those claims. So we're always ahead by the amount that's in our balance sheet.
So it's almost like avoiding a double count somehow.
Yes.
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
That was actually very helpful.
Yeah.
If anyone from the public is watching, that was a mystery unveiled.
You may have to unveil it several times.
That's okay,
Yeah.
that's why I'm here.
Okay, so but the most important thing, no change in the guidance there, right? Okay.
And the last thing I had for highlights, it's just the pension fund, mainly for the new members. You can see that our pension fund here is as of September 30th, 2025 instead of December 31st, 2025. We close out our books, if you will, by the 10th of every month, and then we report out
Amy,
to.
what page?
Oh, I'm sorry. Starting on page 41.
Page, you said what?
41.
41. Give me one moment, I'm so sorry, I'm behind.
Yes.
See.
No, I like it.
Okay, I'm with you. Thank you.
Okay, so page 41, you'll see at the top over here, Lily, through the September 30th, 2025. And it's compared to September 30th, 2024 instead of December 31st, 25 and December 31st, 24. So we close out our books by the 10th of the month and then report out to the Board of Finance. Typically, we don't get our pension investment statements from principal until probably around the 15th of the month, sometimes a little bit later. So we just have a lag in our reporting out because we just don't have the data.
Got it.
A fiducian is coming next month, so can we get that updated for when they're here?
Yeah, it'll be released by then.
Is that the same meeting that's on the 3rd of February, or is that a different meeting? The one that's in the morning?
Morning?
That would be the
The sub,
subcommittee.
the sub.
Oh, no, it's
Yeah.
different. Yeah,
That's
they're
different?
they're
Okay.
coming to the full board.
Okay,
They
got
come
it.
to the full board twice a year and the subcommittee I think quarterly.
Okay,
Yes. 8.
he's going to be in Madurai.
That's all I had for highlights for the town. If If anybody else has any other specific questions.
Any other questions on that? Okay.
No, this is good. Thank you for explaining the September thing.
Just, you wanna go to capital before we get to Board of Ed?
What page is that?
That's 45.
Yes.
Amy, can you just explain for the public appropriation balance December 31st, 2025, what that means?
Yeah, I'll take the new members through the schedule. Okay. Okay, so these are all of our capital projects as they currently stand, projects that are being worked on that have been approved during the budget process. So the first column over here, you have your inception year. So this is the year that the project was approved. We have an estimated expected completion date for our project managers, what our project is, and then the appropriation balance as of December 31st, 2025. So the reason it's December 31st is that they have their appropriation balances as of July 1 that have been approved through the budget, although sometimes projects either need supplemental funding or we're taking from one project that's gonna have an overage and giving it to another project and increasing, doing a transfer to increase one project and reduce another project. So I capture all of those changes in this appropriation column, so that's why it's as of December 31st. So if we had done anything in say October, to increase just plant logic controllers by 50,000, you'll see an increase to 275, which is their most updated budget for the project. And then since capital projects are rolling from year to year, we have a balance as of June 30th, 2025. So when we closed out our last fiscal year, how much had we spent on the project to date? And then our current year expenditures, so anything in fiscal year 26, this is what we have spent in our open year. And then our balance to date of our expenditures is as of December 31st. So it's just adding the prior year expenditures to the current year expenditures to get our balance as of December 31st.
So what's the date for current year that you have? FY 26?
So the current year will be this date up here, so for the period ending December 31st, 2025. Yep. And then your uncommitted balance is your available appropriation minus all of your expenditures to get to a balance of how much of the project still needs to be spent or is open, surplus, deficit, things of that nature.
Is there anything here that was surprising to you?
On the CIP, no.
I mean, there was one to me, and that was the Meadowood Barn restoration, the status for that. Nothing has been spent. It says on hold, TBD.
I can check on this one. It might be grant related, but I don't know off the top of my head. Is this one where the grant is gonna be revoked?
The grant is much less than is needed, and so we're working the problem. I think it's going to you.
Or we came to it, we talked about it at one point, I think, that we didn't have a desire to throw a lot of money into it unless it was funded by grants.
Right?
Let's check Tom Roy.
Yeah, I'll double check on the status of the grant.
Just for members of the public and new members, just as a reminder, anything that has nothing spent after 3 years lapses and either needs action by our board or it just goes away. So that's one of the things we monitor.
And how would we know which one of these expire in 3 years? Would there be a condition?
That would be a good thing to add. Amy, can we, I mean, sometimes we just look at it and notice like
The inception year, you would know if it was over 3 years. Has to be 3 years without any expenditures.
Okay, so it's 3 years.
like for instance, the bridge improvements, Firetown Road, Barn Door, 402-500, nothing's been spent, 402-500 was funded in fiscal year 2024, so that means funding was approved in 2023. So July 2023,
Would you be
right
doing-
here.
Yeah, okay.
So 2023 to 2024 to 2025 to 2026. So if nothing is spent by the end of 2026, that will lapse, or they'll have to come back for a continuation.
Mhm.
So that's one we'll
So
monitor.
so the 3 years is inclusive of the inception date?
Yes, it's when it was approved. So it
Okay.
was approved for the 2024 means it was approved to begin July 2023.
Oh,
The fiscal year goes July 2023 to July 1, 2023 to
24.
June 30th, 2024.
So if it was approved in the referendum of May of 23,
3.
so May fiscal year ending 24, so that would be May of 24, correct?
Fiscal year, no,
23. So fiscal year 23, we had the referendum for fiscal year 24.
Correct. Okay, got it. So fiscal year 23 is for referendum is for fiscal year 24. So you start counting from 24?
So you start counting from July 1, 2023, which is fiscal year 24.
so from July 1, 2023 to July 1, 2024 is 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
2024 to 25 is 2,
Oh, I
25 to
see.
26 is 3. So if nothing is spent by July 1 of this summer, it is
Mhm.
gone, or they have to come to us for a continuation.
Okay, so you
But-
start counting from July 1st?
When it was approved.
Okay, got it.
So even though the referendum is held in the prior fiscal year, it's
Mhm.
approved starting July 1 in the next fiscal year. So
Okay.
it's super complicated. So Amy, to that end, maybe
Maybe we
can you
need the end
highlight
dates. We need the end dates.
or can you highlight when you I don't know, when we
Maybe I'll make like a notation at the bottom. I hate to keep adding columns because it keeps getting smaller and smaller on
Yeah.
the paper. I'll make a notation.
Mhm. Yeah, and maybe a notation somewhere, yes, somewhere would be good, only because of the half year thing and the approval happening just, in the same calendar year but the previous fiscal year.
Yeah, it's all complicated. We
Yeah.
make it super complicated. I mean, the other thing Amy can do is just highlight when something is lapsed. At year end, she highlights this is lapsed, and then she'll come to us during motions and say, hey, can you guys make a motion to
Mhm.
reinstitute?
But I can highlight the ones that are coming up for this fiscal year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great, thank you. I like the idea of just telling us what's lapsing, so we don't have to keep track of that.
Sure. Any other questions on the capital?
Just go on to CNR.
Okay. CNR, it's the same theme. The columns are the same. We have our inception year, the project, the appropriation balance, and then our expenditures to get to our uncommitted balance. The only difference here is you'll see some are overspent. This was a Board of Finance policy that was done a few years ago. Anything above and beyond, or anything, they can go over budget by about $5,000. And we'll clean it up with a year-end transfer. Anything over $5,000 has to come back to the board for approval if it's going over budget by that much.
That's standard, I think.
Yeah, and then one change that's coming in for the next fiscal year is anything in CNR that's equipment or vehicles will lapse after 1 year, so we won't have to track multiple years.
Okay. What about the lapsing for the other things? Is that also a 3-year thing?
No, the CIP that, so the
Got it. No,
those would be
that's
construction,
right,
have 3-year.
Mhm.
Vehicles and equipment, according to council, have 1 year
1 year,
lapse.
got it.
Yeah, we made an exception for this year during the transition,
Mhm.
but next year, by year-end close next year, they'll be gone, or they'll have to come back for an extension.
So is it safe to assume that because it's non-recurring, it's only for that year?
Yes,
Okay.
going forward, unless there's a construction
Mhm.
exception in there, and there are very few of those. There are a few. Only for construction, I think the charter says only for construction can it go 3 years. So anything else would not.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Now, Mark, I guess in your budget, if you see something that is going, you anticipate more than 3 years, can you just note that for us so that we can
Absolutely, sure.
track that differently? Okay, going on to Board of Ed.
Okay, so Board of Education. Only a couple of things to highlight on the revenue side. So this is our listing of all of our grants. These are our state grants. Each grant, a small description of the purpose of the grant, and then what we were awarded in the current year compared to the prior year to see if we're gaining any additional grant funding or if we're potentially losing any grant funding.
Amy, how does that compare to what we budgeted for revenue?
That's a good question. I have it. I do not have it in front of me. But typically they're pretty much right on. We don't really have huge influxes from year to year of grant funding. The biggest one is probably like this open choice amount or this open choice grant because it's attendance based. So for this year, I was just gonna point out like we had an increase of 8 kids. So we had an increase in grant funding of about $98,000. But if we base it on the prior year awards, which is what we typically do, you can see the amounts are de minimis in what we receive, a small decrease of $700.
Now, the net for both categories, the net was a negative. Is that normal? So if you take into account all the numbers listed here as to what was increased, what was decreased,
Oh, like if you were to put all of the grant awards in like a chart?
so the-
It's not abnormal. We typically get additional grant funding. We don't typically lose grant funding. But like the excess cost one, it's contingent upon our special education students and the services that they're getting. So that one can go up or down depending on the year. The open choice one, like I said, adult ed, we get a little bit less because we started using Farmington. The health services, again, $700 less. I think the other one I wanted to point out that's not normal is our IDEA grant. So it's very rare that we see a decrease in our IDEA grant, and we are seeing a decrease of about 23,000 this year. The email that we got from the State Department is basically there's less funds coming into the state of Connecticut overall, so we get less of an allocation, and this is across the board of other cities and towns as well.
So if we were to open the new facility, would the special education placement and excess cost number change in our favor?
It would not change in our favor. It would go the other way. We would lose excess cost funding because we're taking those kids back in-house and reducing our own costs for that kid. So we would lose excess cost funding, but theoretically, since we can only get excess cost funding, we have to do 4.5 times, what is the formula? It's 4.5 times
Per pupil?
For
So
standard
it's
student.
right, yeah, in excess of 4.5 times cost of educating regular student.
Yeah, so we have a per pupil that's calculated by the state when we do our EFS. So that number is provided to us and we have to spend 4.5 times that amount, and then we'll get reimbursed a portion, and it's not even 100% reimbursement. It's been around like 69-70%. So if we're saving money on the front end and losing money on the excess cost grant, it's actually to our favor and to our benefit.
And sometimes we don't even get the cost grant if it's under the 4.5 times. So if it's 40 or 50,000 tuition, we wouldn't even be getting it anyway, so it's neutral.
Right.
It's just saving on the tuition. So it's to a benefit to bring them home
Yeah. In many ways.
in many ways,
many
not
ways.
just tuition, right?
Yeah.
And then moving on to the expenditures. So this is actually quite unusual. Usually there's something that's popping during the year related to either special education, transportation, things of that nature, but really we're kind of status quo. The amounts from year to year are pretty consistent. The percentages are pretty consistent. This is probably one of the closest I've ever seen, 44.9 this year compared to 44.6 last year. Any changes, like this out of district line where it's 56% this year compared to 62% last year, the rate of spending, you'll see that the dollar value is pretty close, and it's just due to the timing of payments. So typically down here, you'll see like a whole list of by category of why the percentages increased or decreased from last year to this year. It's usually increases in electricity costs, special education, transportation. But knock on wood, right now we're kind of we're within budget. We're going in accordance with budget right now. We're in a very good spot to just steer the track for
Are you seeing any of these line items over or under in terms of projections? They're just totally on budget.
So is there something that's being done differently that's giving you that level of clarity?
Yes, so we quote unquote fixed our special education budget for the fiscal year 26. That was the transportation and the tuitions line for our special education had been steadily increasing over the years, and then the number of our special ed students, and we were constantly playing catch up. So last year we were able to do a course correction for some students that we knew were coming on, and then we had some that were coming off, and we still needed a substantial increase in our special education, but it finally put us in a stable place.
Great, that's good.
For the non-lapsing fund, none of that is assigned. That's just the balance, right?
Right.
Okay, and that's about 860.24.
Your questions on Board of Ed?
Any questions on Board of Ed?
Nope, not here.
Okay, well, why don't we go into the debt scenarios then?
Is that the model that you sent
Yes.
us? Okay.
Okay.
So there is some good news in the model. I think I sent it to you, Wendy, as well. With the updated grand list. We had originally projected about 500 in grand list. It's now at 900. That's offset, lost some state funding or other revenues. I can't remember which other revenues we lost. We were at the tri-board, we were looking at a net new revenue to the town about 250. So the 900 in grand list would still be minus the 250, so the 750, right?
Right, so
Which scenario is this?
so this, I'm just showing the grand list, it's just the base scenario,
Okay.
but just showing you the change for the grand list that Lisa was referencing. We have 0.46% increase in our grand list, which is about $526,000, which translated into our fiscal year 27 Board of Finance guidance at about 2.33. And then if you look at the updated grand list model, we are now looking at a 0.81% grand list growth, which gives us a little over $900,000. And then that translates to the levy calc with the Board of Finance guidance at a tax increase of 1.94%.
Yeah.
I told Lily,
I
we
didn't
even wanted
trust
to
her.
come in under 2. I said, wait a month. We'll be under 2. That is not finalized. We still have 2 weeks to finalize. It is due to the state February 1, so there's not a lot of time.
Let's get it under 1.
I don't think that's gonna happen. It could even, occasionally it goes up.
Don't tell me that.
Or it goes the other direction. We had one year when it went the other direction, but that, I mean, the 194 is, I mean, I think everyone on this board wanted to be in the ones. So if we get, there is a chance, just going back to the revenue, there is a chance, when the governor's budget comes out, we'll get more revenue than we have anticipated. My inclination, we talked about what do you do with revenue variance, my inclination without having seen the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education priorities is to apply that to further reducing that tax increase because
I'm
we've had
telling
so
you,
many.
let's get it under one.
So if that comes in, there's probably a consensus among board members that any new revenues will not be spent but will be applied for mill rate relief given the past few years of tax increases.
This is a nice surprise.
I told you it was gonna happen.
News isn't ever at the end of it as good or as bad as it first seems, so just sort of temper,
Right.
we're not there yet.
Well, I'm just a moment of exuberation and then I'll enjoy it for the
I love your
moment.
energy.
Which now puts pressure on Amy to make sure I remain exuberant.
More pressure on Francine, but
Francine can take it.
yeah. So that's good news when we get to that. So we will not have the governor's numbers until probably the second or third week in February, in which case we'll really have an idea of what the mill rate will be. That's at the time we can look at that. But right now, at least they're trending in the right direction. If they were trending in the opposite direction, there might be new guidance on budgetary things. But right now, budgetary guidance is 3.5 and 3.5. And Amy, can you go and just click on the town operating and the school operating above just to show where that health, you'll see up there in the top thing for the Board of Selectmen, it's 346 and then they did the minus 200, that's the health reserve we're applying that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
If you go down to the Board of Ed, you'll see that translates to minus 800, which is the health, and the combination is the 1 million.
Yeah.
So it's applied to the various boards proportionately to their expenditures.
Oh, now it all makes sense.
Yes,
Oh,
this is how it, this is
how
why it's
it
good,
works.
this is why it's a good thing to take those reserves.
Yeah, okay, got it.
And then if you go down
It's like a
to
light bulb moment.
line 14, Amy, just for the new members, you'll see that's 900. That's part of the debt service plan where we're using capital reserves to offset the temporary bump in the debt service. This is, I think, the third year or the second year, I can't remember. Third year, so that will then, you'll see going forward, there's nothing more being spent there after that. If you look at debt service, the line, can you go up and show debt service line? You'll see that we were at 955, now we're at 9, it's getting down to 8 pretty much regularly with slight blips. If the goal is to get it to 8 million and years when we have 7, 8, 1, 9, what we can do there is then start budgeting, and what Amy has started to do is some cash for capital budgeting to get closer to the 8 million. It would be 200, or you could do a slightly inflationary additive to it. So is it 8 million plus an inflationary factor, 8 million plus an inflationary factor, so that you're maintaining that is one thing to do. The idea behind doing the cash for capital contribution is it starts to provide a funding source for CNR, but also when you get to a major capital investment, those can all be wiped out and help for mill rate stabilization if it's needed at that point. But it's a way to start building in. If we can get that number closer to 7 million mark, which is why do we wanna reduce debt, then you increase the cash for capital to 1 million. So you've got 7 million in debt service, cash for capital now is 1 million, and you've reduced debt, you've created a dedicated funding source for CNR, and you provided some capacity when we get to a major capital project. So those are things we could do. The problem is when if the grant list continues to be very, very tight, the first thing that is cut in a budget universally is what line? It's the cash for capital.
That's right.
So it's a hard one to maintain, but it is something we should try to get to a level on. Right, Amy, you wanna walk us through some of the scenarios? Start with the assumptions you used. What did you use for budgetary increases?
I just have a quick question on the debt service and then the use of capital reserves for debt service for 25, 26. Now, the debt service total amount would be, 11-ish, right?
No. So the debt service is 955. Then the 14 and the 13 are revenues, so those are
Oh, got it.
offsets.
Okay, so that's the, got it,
Yes.
okay,
The
got
gross
it,
number.
okay, understood.
Yep.
Okay.
Alright,
I was
so
shocked
for
when I saw that.
fiscal year 27, this is just built in with the Board of Finance guidance from the tri-board meeting. So if we go out to fiscal year 28, the town and the school operating budgets just have an assumption of 3%. The reason that 3% was used is sometimes in years it had been less than 3%, sometimes it's more than 3%. But then on the revenue side, we were very conservative and we assumed no new revenue coming in from the state in any of these years, which is highly, highly unlikely. The only increase that we have built in here is our reimbursement for the motor vehicle tax that comes in from the state, which we can use based on our numbers to try to predict. So that's the only thing that's built into anticipated revenue. It anticipates us not increasing any of our fees, no state revenue increases, nothing. So the 3% combined with no increases in revenue will probably get you to, you know, a higher operating budget number if we do so see those increases in revenue come to fruition over the next several years. So for now, it's 3% for the town operating, it's 3% for the school operating. I will take you back to the cash for capital along with the debt service. There are separate tabs for those. We have our anticipated revenue. Like I said, no anticipated increases except for the state reimbursement for motor vehicles. This is the last year that Lisa just spoke to related to our use of capital reserves to offset our debt service. So our gross expenditures minus our revenues are net expenditures of about 114 million, which is what we need from property taxes to fund the budget.
All right, Amy, before you go down, can you look at debt service as a percent of the operating budget?
Oh,
Just go through that.
So this line 20, we have a debt service cap that is Board of Finance policy to be at no more than 8% of the operating budget. So I just calculated down here what the percentage is if you take our debt service as a percent of our gross expenditures to make sure that we're staying within the Board of Finance guidance.
And Amy, just before we move on, so when we did Latimer Lane, we were not gonna be, it was at 7%. And to accommodate Latimer Lane, we knew there was gonna be a blip above 7%, but it was always the Board of Finance's intention, although it doesn't have to be because we have a new board, to get that back to the 7%. So we have always been trying to work back to the 7%. By maintaining it at the 8% level, you'll see debt, because the operating budgets are going up every year, debt service actually goes down if you keep the 8 million static. Which is why one thing we should think about is instead of keeping it static 8 million, do an 8 million plus an inflation indicator each year. If we wanna increase that, or we just keep it low, because once squadron hits, that number can hit as high as we're at, 8 million now, that goes to 13 million. So it's a way to stabilize debt service. Alright, Amy, keep going.
And then down here, we have our property tax calculation based off of our grand list estimate. And then we have our tax collection rate. So using our grand list estimates and our tax collection rate, we are able to calculate what we think our mill rate is going to be, which then will in turn calculate, in this case, what an impact to a $450,000 home would be. So their estimated taxes would be about $10,600, a $200 increase from the prior year, or 1.94%. And then down here, I just noted what the scenarios were. So this one is our base scenario. So we're just starting from scratch. We have no squadron project, no other major projects. The operating budgets that I noted at 3%. The target tax increase is around 2%. We're building up for our cash for capital in this model. And then we have increases for bonding that we can do in fiscal year 34, just because the debt is coming off. So we're able to create some capacity in those out
Amy, can you
years.
talk about which debt is coming off in 34?
Don't know. So it looks like we have, it's not in this chart, I'd have to pull it.
When does Henry James fall off?
So Henry James falls off June 30th, 2036, and then Latimer falls off June 30th, 2045.
So ideally, we wouldn't start Squadron until 2036. I mean, generally, past practice of the Board of Finances, you don't do a new major project until an old one falls off. We may be asked to accelerate that because of the availability of certain grants that the Board of Ed is concerned may not be available at a later date. But
And are we allowed, given the flexibility to do that, would there be a special set of resolutions for that?
for what?
To go away from our guidance, from our policy on, is that a policy or is that just
No,
That's
that's just a practice.
okay, got it.
So we can do it anytime, it's just been the Board of Finance's practice to time your debt so that you don't have multiple. This would be 3 capital projects going at once, which is like having 3 kids in college at the same time. You can do it, but you don't go on vacation, and Mark and Wendy would not be doing much capital at all during that
Are
time.
you ready?
That was really mean, Lisa. That was a really mean example.
Ask them to get scholarships.
Let's go,
So-
let's go.
Amy, in your scenario 34, if that's when the bonding happens and debt service goes up, can you show us that?
Yeah, so on to the next tab. So down here, just as a point of reference, this was our capital plan that was approved during the fiscal year 26. So essentially, I just took the 10 million every 2 years and just plopped it into every other year since that's when we bond. So you'll see that for fiscal year 26, there's no bonded projects. We had mentioned before. During the quarterly update, we were able to reduce this bonding so that we could use year-end closeout money, so we do not have to bond for fiscal year 26 projects. They've already been taken care of via our closeout, mostly related to the Henry James project. For fiscal year 27, we have our 5 million, and then from the this is the $1 million that was being referenced, where we had year-end closeout in excess of what we have for available bonded projects that have been approved. So there is $1 million, if you will, that we can utilize to offset our bonded projects.
So that was when we had discussed before you guys were on the board, that was the plan to use, or maybe were you on the board when we did close out? I can't remember.
Yes.
I think it was your first time. So the idea then, when we had discussed it, was to use that to offset, which is contrary to what I think Mark was discussing as an option. So that would obviously change if we got rid of that million. Suddenly those numbers would be different.
So then going on to the future years, each color that's together, these are the capital plans that go together for our bonding, since we bond every other year. So we'll bond in fiscal year 27 for fiscal year 27 and fiscal year 26. We'll bond in fiscal year 29 for fiscal year 29 projects and fiscal year 28 projects. So the 10 million every 2 years carries out until we get to fiscal year 34, where we can actually do 16 million for 2 years instead of the 10 million for every 2 years. And if we go back to the levy calc and we go to
Why is that?
because it's creating capacity. I'll show you 1 second. So we have fiscal year 34 and fiscal year 35. We're going to approve those projects, but then we're going to bond for them in the spring of fiscal year 35. And it's going to hit our debt service in fiscal year 36. So if we go back to here, so you can see that our debt service has leveled off. We are 7.9, 8.2, 7.9. We've actually created a little bit of capacity in here where we can keep our tax increase around 2%, and we can afford to bond a little bit more and have a little bit higher of a debt service. And then we're back to 7.6, 8.9, etc. So in those out years, we can create some capacity with our bonding as old projects fall off and we put new projects on, where we can start to increase this number beyond the 10 million every 2 years and still stay within the same debt service range.
there you see the cash for capital going way up, and that's part of the capacity. Can you talk about that?
Right, so the capital reserve tab that you have over here. I just did this little thing over at the side. So our cash for capital, what we typically need year over year has been about 2.5 million in today's dollars. We haven't always gotten 2.5 million. We have the standard 416,250 on the town side. We have $550,000 on the board side. But in accordance with either our plan and what we've been previously funded, like a good number for us for cash for capital right now for our CNR would be about 2.5 million per year. So for fiscal year 26, if we use that 2.5 million and then I just built in a 3% escalator, I just did a quick Google search on inflationary rates over the years, and what we should use for an average is set anywhere from 2.5% to 3%. So I just built in an escalator so that, you know, for fiscal year 27, we're increasing our cash for capital by that inflationary rate, so $75,000. So for fiscal year 27, we want to do 2,575. Again, we increase it in fiscal year 28, so we get to the 2.6. So we want to make sure that that number is increasing with inflation instead of just remaining stagnant, or we're not getting the same bang for our buck.
Now, do we know what that's going to be applied towards yet, or do we just keep it as a general amount?
No, this is just for budget modeling, but when Mark and Matthew present their budgets, they do have a breakdown of all the projects that total that amount.
Okay.
Is that for equipment and vehicles, or is that in lieu of bonding?
No, that would be CNR. You can use it in lieu of bonding, but I just take this number based on CNR needs.
Okay, and how do you anticipate using capital reserves in this plan?
So you're ahead of me. So
sorry.
hold on. So we go down to the bottom, and by the end of the model, at fiscal year 41, we should be at about 3.8 million with our inflationary increases for cash for capital. So that was my target amount for this line here for our cash for capital. So each year, keeping around that 2% target tax increase, I just took the difference of whatever our budget was with the operating increase built in, our debt service increase built in, and anything left over to get to around that 2% that we could afford to build into the model, I would build it in. So in fiscal year 28, we can add about 100,000, 400,000, 400,000, which is not in line with that 3.4 million that we need to get to. But as you can see in fiscal year 32, we're starting to get there. So fiscal year 33, we're starting to get there. We can add 1.2 million, we're still at 2%. We can add 1.7 million, we're still around that 2%. So we go to the out years, again, just increasing as we can, debt service falling off as it needs to, but we're still able to bond that 10 million every 2 years and then start increasing. By fiscal year 41, we're able to get to that 3.8 million.
Does this include the squadron
Yeah,
bonding?
that's my
No,
question.
this is just a
Okay.
base model.
Just the base, okay.
So then we have fiscal year 41 where we get to that target. So if we get to this target, we don't need capital reserves for anything other than, say, like an emergency appropriation. So we don't need $5 million in capital reserve because we're funding it through the current budget for current year needs. Going back to Lisa's question on how much in capital reserves we can use, I kind of backed into it. So for fiscal year 27, we need about 1.5 million or 2.5 million, in cash for capital. Well, our model shows us that if we put 2.5 million, our tax increase is not gonna look like that. So we can't really do that. So what I've used the capital reserves for are basically a way to feather in the difference over several years. So for fiscal year 26, if we assume $1 million surplus that we're going to come to fruition, with our operating budget, we're able to take our current balance, unassigned fund balance and capital reserves, add in $1 million, and then when you can use about 1.5 million out of that capital reserve to get to that 2.5 million. Again, same thing for fiscal year 28. So we have our tax collection rate. for fiscal year 27, that's gonna close out into our fund balance. We have that $100,000 contribution that we plugged in here, that's gonna hit capital reserves. And then we're gonna take what we need in fiscal year 28 of this 2.6, we're gonna back out these two numbers, and then we can use $2 million of our capital reserve. And then this just goes all the way down until we don't really need our capital reserves because we built in so much of it into our operating. And then we have a reserve balance of, 3 million or whatever number the board is comfortable at. We can put it down to 200,000, we can do 3 million and plan for a large project. But the capacity is there to be able to use the reserves over several years.
The other option for year-end surplus, instead of it going into capital reserves, we could use it to offset borrowing if we wanna get our debt down. Just pay for cash at that point. Or if they're pay down our pension, if the world continues to collapse and the market drops even more, we're gonna have to infuse the pensions in the future years.
But is that the goal to get to that scenario where you don't have to use capital reserves at all, or should we keep building those reserves?
Well, I think they're gonna be built in any way because some of the surplus we end in year and you can't budget for, like you got a state grant that you weren't anticipating. It's there.
It's a great
So then,
problem.
but the question is, what do you use extra money for? And there's always a use. We can either use it for more capital. You saw Mark's list. There's gonna be more capital needs than we have the funds. So that's why he keeps a list. These are the priority. If we get an unusual infusion, we can do a little bit lower than the line than we were planning. Or we can say, you know what, a new board may come in and they hate borrowing. Some towns, like the fire district, doesn't borrow at all. You can take that surplus and say, you know what, you don't need 3 million to bond, we can just pay cash for it, we'll reduce our debt. Or we can say pension funding has plummeted because of the tariffs and our funding ratio is now at 60%, we wanna get that up, we take that 3 million and put it into the pension.
Okay.
So there is always a use for it. I've never been in a position where the towns haven't had a good use for it, a needed use for it. So it's not like it would be for fund to haves, it would go into essential funding at that point. 2 questions though for this board. I mean, 2% is about 200 a year. Over 5 years, that you're paying 1,000 more in taxes. So the question is comfort level. I mean, we built that in as an assumption because we thought that voters have been willing to approve 2%. It's cumulative. How do people feel about paying 1,000 more in taxes after 5 years? Some towns will say, nope, you can pay only what a grand list is.
Well, when I went door knocking, I think the sting of the previous tax increase was still pretty raw. So I think what I don't know what they'll say now. But I think the idea of us doing everything we can to bring it as low as we can is what we should do because that's what they asked us to do.
So Amy, the next reval is 2029, right? That's when it'll hit. So both Mark's analysis and mine and what we're seeing recent revals, like just this year, we're seeing a huge shift again from the residential to commercial and a huge increase in taxes.
The other
So
way
this
around.
model does not accommodate that because we don't know what that's gonna be. But that could be another 5 or 6% to 10% tax increase for individuals
Yeah.
after that reval. So that has me a little bit anxious about doing that.
When is that reval gonna happen? 2 years, 3 years?
2 years. It'll hit in 2029.
Did you say the shift was from residential to commercial? I thought it was gonna be.
I mean, commercial to residence, yes.
residential.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing, and that's what makes me nervous is that reval will again cause problems unless we fix the commercial vacancy situation, because when the reval happens and we have this many empty buildings in the commercial space, it's gonna be really, that's gonna sting quite a bit. So
Amy, show us your favorite scenario. And the other thing about this, I mean, we're projecting 3% increases in operating budget. Mark can barely get to 3.5. Is that a realistic number? I don't know.
Mark can work his magic.
Got a lot of magic, Lily.
Yeah,
That's right.
he promised us 3 million in savings, so we'll find it.
He's gonna do it.
Okay, so that's that one. And then did you want scenario 1 or 2?
Whichever you like the best.
3,
1 or 2?
2.
Let's go with 2. That was the most interesting one for me.
Okay. So we have the same grand list projections. The capital improvement plan's the same. So this model, we go down to the bottom. We have Squadron Line being funded in 2035 and 2036.
Amy, before you move from that, when is it approved by the voters?
I don't know, I'd have to work backwards. If it's funded in 2035, that's the majority of the construction, and then I think it's 2 years before that.
So 33 for approval? Okay. Can you add that to the bottom there, just so we can keep track of that? When
And
does
so,
it go to the voters?
so for those of us who are new, if that is the timeline, when does Board of Finance have to start looking at it and working on it? Is that something that,
Now,
I mean, is okay?
because it would be part of the 5-year plan. 2027, that would be a 6-year plan, I mean, which is why we need the 10-year plan, right? Cause we would start planning for it today, which is what we're doing. Which is why we do need a CIP that's longer than 5 years, if that's one of the options. But why don't you walk us through what that looks like? And why did you pick that as opposed to 36 when Henry James falls off?
I just did it based on where the numbers, I saw them decreasing and where we had capacity. There wasn't any other reason. Again, our operating budget's 3%, tax increase around 2%. This keeps your debt service at 10 million every 2 years, no opportunity for increase. You still have contributions to cash for capital, and then you still have the ability to utilize some capital reserves. So, just starting with actually, you know what, I'm gonna go to so if you go to your amortization schedule, the capital financing tab, you'll see that we're good until 2035. Our first budget year impact would be about 33 million. So this is based on a $66 million town portion. So the project itself is over $100,000, assuming the town portion is 66 million. And then we are going to bond for it in 2 tranches. So in
So
fiscal,
Amy, I'm sorry, the 33 million is all for Squadron, or is that include the 10 million for
it's all for Squadron.
Okay.
So the 33 million,
Is it rebuilding the whole building
That's
or?
one of the options.
That's one of the options. The other option is 55 million in repairs, so we can model all that,
More
right?
expensive one puts a daycare, preschool in those, so like.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
and plus the preschool, but we get additional grant funding for that.
Yeah.
But this is just based on current renovate as new current grant estimates. This isn't for any of the, we would get additional grant money for certain things such as the pre-K.
Do we have cash flow to do that, to flip that?
Well, we'll see where we are in 2035. Our operating budgets would be increasing, therefore our taxes would be increasing. So I mean, there is a potential, we'll see how much we have in reserves and then perhaps. But
That would change the amount we have to bond and the timing of the bonding if there's no cash flow, right?
so it would, but when we bond for this one, so if it's 2 years and they're hitting ground and we're bonding in 2035, we're actually taking some of that money where we're prepaying a portion of the project and then a portion of the project hasn't been done, so that money's just sitting in our bank account. And then by the time they catch up, we're going to issue for the second one so that we have the rest of the money that they need. So it's just the timing of when we do it and when they can get the construction done. So if they tell me that the construction timeline is different, I would change these numbers so that we're halfway through the project and only getting cash flow of around 15, 20 million, whatever it is. And then I would bond for it to make sure that we had the rest of the money in-house.
Can you remind us what structure 1 is? Is that just straight line fixed? What is?
So this is level principal
Okay.
instead of level ten.
Right, thanks.
So you're going to have to be here in 2035 to explain this again.
I mean, I plan on it. And then 2036 will take care of the other 33 million. So going back to how this plays out in our model, let me just freeze this. So we're just trucking along, we're still adding our cash for capital in the years that we can, we're still maintaining our debt service levels. And then in 2032, we take a little break because our tax increase is getting around to be about 2.3. And our debt service increased from the prior year. But then we're back at it in 2033, we can start adding $1.7 million. And now is where the major project hits, where there's no cash for capital because we are already at 2% of a tax increase. So we can't afford to add any additional cash for capital. Same thing in the following year, we're at 2.09, no room to add anything for cash for capital. However, we are going to use about 1.3 million to offset this debt spike. So you'll see here, because we're adding on the squadron project, our debt service is going from 10 million to 13 million. That's a huge increase. So we want to take some of our debt service and we want to offset it with our current our capital reserve fund.
So where is that that assumes there will be money in the capital
Right.
reserve, so we need to plan for
Yeah,
that.
I'll get to that. So then fiscal year 36, we have our 2.09, and then the same philosophy as we move along. We can start adding to our capital, and again, by the end of 2041, we are at that target of 3.8 for our cash for capital.
But look at our debt service is now 12 million. It was 8 million.
So
What is that? But you'll see as a percent of budget, it's still below.
it's still
You
within
have
the
to realize
guidance.
the budget's grown a lot over
Right.
that period, right? You're at 170 something budget,
You're at like, yes.
160 something.
5%.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, will the taxpayers support this? And we'll have an idea after the referendum on Saturday. That will be one indicator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, cause are the voters, we've talked to a lot of voters who are not okay with the 2% tax increase every year.
Yeah,
So-
Isn't the reality though, given the way our grand list is growing, that like you're gonna have to be around inflation? Cause at the end of the day, all of our costs are gonna go up by inflation. So if the grand list doesn't grow, you're gonna have to, we all have to come up with more taxes.
Yeah.
So I think a 2, like being below 2, to me, I always tell you guys like the Fitzgerald rule, like if I get caught in Fitzgerald and someone asks me the question, it passes the test to me, like I could tell someone 194. Yeah, I'd love it to be 0 too, I pay the taxes as well, but like I just feel like realistically in this town, given where we are, I think the bigger issue to me is what are we doing, which is out of our control, is what are we doing about commercial development and other things like that, which is gonna, like that, what you guys talked about in 2 or 3 years, that's scary, that's gonna be a hard one
Yeah.
to tell
That's-
people like what's going on there.
Yeah, that's the one that keeps me up at night because that's going to hit us in 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's going to take 2 years to get those places filled up and make it available to people, and
Yeah.
we're already behind.
So I guess maybe one thing we should ask Mark to do is when you present your budget, to start thinking about what is the plan for the rebound and how are we gonna mitigate the tax
We are.
boost?
We were looking at that. One other thing I'll just add, to Lalitha's point, and the vacancy study that Main Street is doing, and thank you for serving on that. I think is gonna get going and that should give us some information, a lot of which I think frankly I already have. The point is that,
It hasn't been formed yet.
are you not?
But Mark, has it been formed yet?
No, it has not, but I heard you'd volunteered.
I'm
So thank you
very
for
much
volunteering.
volunteering
So
for
he's
that, yeah.
assuming it's half done already. That's what we're doing. He's on it, we're fine.
I think that the early discussions about that, and I'll just take a minute here because so you can see kind of where my thought process is that it's two-dimensional to think about filling the commercial space. You're not gonna fill the vacant commercial space with commercial tenants in the time you have. The reval's 2 years away. I talked to a developer today, a big developer in town, regarding very big property in town that is currently vacant. And his analysis is that the value will drop by a quarter at least. And there's nothing that we can do about that in the time that we have left. We've already passed the point of really being able to address it. Which means that the only difference I have with this is that I think it's too late to save us in the year after the revow. I don't know that there's much we can do about that. The real way to address this is to incent conversions of those large, and start with the larger ones. We don't have time to worry about every, vacant commercial property, but start with the bigger ones. And what can this town do to incent a conversion to mixed use or residential? And you have to incent that, and that's why the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously the other meeting to authorize me to pursue an amendment to the town's abatement policy. It was adopted a few years ago. Now, I know that's controversial. Please hold your applause until you see it, but I'm talking about a strategic tool in our tool chest, without which we will not succeed. And I'm gonna present that to the Board of Selectmen probably at the last meeting in February. I wanna do it before the budget, so this is part parcel of the discussion we're gonna have, because Amy's projections are only as good as the 3% grant list growth. And so you need to look at that.
3% grant list, those.
What's 3% in our budget, right?
Yes,
3%.
operating increase.
So what we have to do is we have to look at how much is Simsbury built out in these projections each year, and what do we estimate for that grand list growth, and can we exceed it? Because right now, I don't see how we get there.
Yeah, the difference will be the political consideration, cause every door knock, every phone call I made, people do not wanna see more mixed use. So to incentivize something that nobody wants,
I think that the developers are telling me, and I've talked to several of them, and these are town players, been here a lot longer than I have, and the development community needs density in order to support, anything. You want a more walkable, this is the POCD talking, not me, but you need a walkable, Hot Meadow, downtown core, mixed use development. The money, the return on investment for the developers, they're saying isn't there without some kind of tax abatement to incent that development. Now, I say strategic because you're not giving away the store, but if you don't do anything, you're gonna continue to have that vacancy. In other words, my question to the vacancy panel not yet formed is, if you give us the data, what are we gonna do with it? And the only answer I can come up with is, you better incent what you want, or you're gonna get either one of two things: nothing, or you're gonna get what you don't want. And that's really the dilemma here. It is about grand list growth. I can keep expenses to guidance, and that's what we're gonna do. Eventually, it will hurt. It's hurting this year, but it will, the cuts will be not skin deep. I sent a memo today to all external stakeholders, warning them now that there was a potential for budget cuts, because I've worked in communities where it's budget cuts every year. And one thing I've learned is that if you're gonna cut positions, or you're gonna cut external partners, or any of those things are happening, you better let them know and send a message now. So that memo went to all our partners today. And next week, I'm sending a message, a similar memo to all our collective bargaining groups. Because we're not close to hitting the guidance yet, and we've got less than a month to go. And even though this news is really good on the grand list growth, it doesn't change your guidance in terms of the expense side growth to the budgets, right? So we're looking at some significant cuts on the municipal side. And remembering telling you what you already know, the municipal side is what, 24% of the total budget. So my little portion is about a quarter of the total. And we're looking to make significant cuts on the municipal side. I don't know what the Board of Education is doing.
same cuts, 3.5, yeah.
Same increase,
Same.
same increase. I don't know what that translates into in terms of cuts and real pain at the Board of Ed side, particularly because I understand they've gotten a handle, and congratulations on the special ed costs. Which sounds to me to be more like right sizing previous budget under projections than anything else, but to your point, I think thank God we got that done and we're seeing it level now. So we don't expect, I wouldn't expect surprises next year. Especially with Two Farms Village coming online and, you know, some other good things, but, you know, so, you know, I think that's probably the first time that Simsbury's seen a memo like I sent out today, but we've gotta hit that guidance and that's what we're gonna do.
So keep going, Amy.
Okay, so then our use of capital reserves, so again, the CNR ends at that 3.8 target with inflation. So then the use of capital reserves under this plan, we start with our 4.9 again, or shy of 5 million of unassigned. Say there's a $1.3 million surplus. Use of capital reserves, again, is just a formula based on what we need compared to what we can use. And again, it just flows downhill, 1.8, 1.8, 1.9. No contribution to cash for capital. We need to use additional capital reserves.
When you say capital reserves, that's for the CNR purchases.
It can be for whatever, but in this instance, it is for CNR. Again, nothing in fiscal year 32 for our contribution in cash for capital. There was no room, but then in fiscal year 33, we can build in that $1 million and still stay within the 2%. Same thing in 34. Again, nothing to contribute in 35, so then we're usually more reserves, and so on and so on. And by the end of this, we'll have a reserve balance of about, well, negative 35,000, which will work itself out over the next, 15 years of the model, so to speak. I'm not worried about 35,000. So anyway, so our use of reserves based on this would be, it wouldn't be really consistent from year to year, but there is an available use of reserves and contribution to the capital reserve fund to get us through those years where we cannot add to our cash for capital, or we don't have enough for cash for capital. And then it uses our cash for capital plus our 1.3 that we need to offset our debt service. So this gives you a little bit of everything. It's not as good as the base model because obviously there's a big project built in, but it's not a terrible place to be either.
So that
Nice.
would mean next year, if we were to do this thing, we would see Squadron first on the CIP in year 5 in next year's budget.
33, right, we agreed on?
Yeah.
So fiscal year 33, so yeah, year 4.
Year 4. Okay, so that's a lot more palatable than year 1.
Yes.
Okay. What's another option?
So our last option that I put together is the scenario 1, where we do it in a very shortened time frame. So under this one, we have the Squadron project being funded in 2031 and 2032. Again, operating budget's at 3, tax increase at 2. No cash for capital in the years of bonding, no use of reserves through fiscal year 33, and then no additional bonding in fiscal year 30 to 33. So basically, in between the fiscal year 30 mark, the fiscal year 33, fiscal year 36, we're kind of, things are tight.
And it's tight mostly on the town side. It would really limit your capital ability.
Where's the cost of the project? Is it still 66 million?
Yeah.
So you're saying the
You can
cost
see
of
it
the
hits
project is the same 66 million if you do it in 23 and if you
No,
did
there
it-
is an escalator, but I also am super conservative on the grant reimbursement, so I think our grant reimbursement is gonna end up being higher. So I just used the same number for this year, so 1 year it's more of an escalator and 1 year it's more of a grant reimbursement that I'm probably a
Got it.
little high on.
Got
Just wanna freeze these panes.
Chair, can I just ask a question too? So none of the models show the alternative to the project, which was repair and renovation at 40 million, or what's the number?
55.
55 million.
Yeah, that's another scenario we'd like to see and you should evaluate as well.
Yeah, I haven't heard 55 million until tonight, but just for the renovation, but isn't the decision-making point a comparison of the two options as opposed, is it a zero-sum game? where we say we're either doing the project as a build or we're not? Or are we comparing the difference between?
I would evaluate all scenarios because in terms of affordability, that's why we need the 20-year plan. Obviously, if it's a $55 billion project, you will have more ability to do more town things. So you have to look at the whole thing as terms of what's needed, and I don't know that, only you guys know that. Or if you don't know that, what resources do you need to figure that out?
But if it's 55 million of repairs and maintenance, I'm not sure the level of state reimbursement will be there, which is why I think that the Board of Ed was looking more towards a renovate as new, because you're eating the majority of that 55 million.
So that's what we would want that information, what is the reimbursement, because I know when we do roofs, sometimes we get half reimbursement, so if we could get an idea of what that is and what those numbers are, we could run those scenarios as well.
So
But
when do you,
if you don't do the project till, just talking out loud, till 2035, say, you've got defined maintenance and renovation costs that you're putting into the building prior to that, even knowing that it's gonna be a
Also,
rebuild.
that has to be part
That's
of the evaluation.
that's money flushed down the proverbial drain.
Well, so you don't know it, I mean, you have to run the numbers, so you do have to run the numbers,
Well, no, I'm not saying we wouldn't run the numbers, I'm just,
yeah. No, that's part of the calculation, absolutely, that's why we need the real 20-year plan. That's exactly right.
So when do you think it would be reasonable for us to be able to look into that scenario, given that this has not yet been
Is Mark the right person to ask that, or would that be Board of Ed? Because it's an estimate on how long, what's gonna cost to maintain their aging infrastructure versus repair it versus rebuild it?
so it's
Right.
interesting, the charter gives me the responsibility for
It's the
preparing
town
the plan,
manager.
so it
Oh,
kind of.
I tried, Mark.
Yeah.
I know you did, and I
I wouldn't
appreciate
have
it.
asked him otherwise.
Tried.
I would just say that it's and thank you very much, it falls on me to do it, but we have a meeting tomorrow and Amy's given me some really good background on what the decision-making process is gonna be and what the timeline's gonna be. But I share many of the concerns that this board does, particularly in terms of the reval and the shifting of commercial to residential and
And we're watching national events play out that may impact
know.
our finance, I mean, the market just, I don't know where it ended, it was
I just asked for
down.
the board's indulgence, and when you see the capital plan, we are reflecting the unfunded roughly 40 million, and I'm not sure of that number yet, on asks and needs that our department heads are they're not nice to haves, they need these things, they're projecting that they need them. And we're just moving them below the line and showing them unfunded, and as you do that year after year, no analysis that you're seeing tonight will show you the deferred maintenance on roofs and buildings, the increased cost in plows and street sweepers and equipment. A fire, not that we buy fire trucks, but a ladder truck was $1.5 million just 5 years ago, it's $3 million now. And it takes 2 years to get it. That's just one example. So I worry about the unseen. I worry about the fact that I'm telling my department heads, not only are you not getting it in year 1, you're not getting it in year 2, 3, 4, 5. Which I will say for the cameras is a whole lot better than putting it in years 3, 4, 5 as a wish and then it never happens, which is what was happening previously. Or worse, year 6, the last year becomes the catch-all, which is what many municipalities do. Put it in year 6 because it has to be on the capital plan to signal that you need it at some point. So you just end up putting all of it in year 6 and your capital plan becomes nothing more, forgive me, than a wish list of things that you need. And we're working with this board and department heads to make this capital plan meaningful. But there's a piece of it that will show you all the things that we're not asking for funding for, and that's
There will be a lot more things if we do
It's right.
squadron.
exactly.
Yeah,
And-
so
and-
but that's the analysis we need to see and we need you to do, and which why we're signaling to you what resources do you need to do this, cause we need to see more than a 5-year plan if we're gonna do squadron.
I think that I'll know more when I talk to the superintendent and the chairman of the Board of Ed tomorrow. I don't wanna get out in front of that conversation, but my understanding is that they've engaged Tecton, that they've got funding for other external help in terms of this, so it isn't just a financial consideration, it's a top to bottom analysis of the building and the capital needs, all of that I can't do, but I believe that,
Yeah, they had, but you can do on the town side, I mean, we need it not just for squadron, we need the comprehensive look of what we're doing.
on the Board of Ed school project, I agree with you, but a 20-year plan on I just respectfully, until we get a handle on 5 or 6 years, a $200,000 or $300,000 piece of equipment, I don't have the resources to do that level of analysis on every item of capital that,
Just for the CIP.
well, yeah, but that's every truck, that's all, that,
No, trucks are not on the CIP. CIP would be bonded and grant funding.
I'm happy to have this conversation with you, Chair. I wanna give you everything you need.
Thank you. And thank you for working with, like, I see what the Board of Ed does, right?
Yep.
They have, in addition, they have their regular work, which is all the schools and the curriculum and all of that, and so thank you for being there to
Glad to help.
guide them on squadron.
She does most of the work.
She's amazing.
So the question that Mark had asked about what to do with that $1 million, thoughts on that? The bonding, I mean, do we not give any guidance on that? Do we say use it as we budgeted? Amy, do you have thoughts on that? I mean, our bond council said you wanna use it to offset bonding. Do more
I
bonding.
thought we violently agreed on that, right? No?
No, I think we didn't come to a
I
resolution.
don't really feel I can come up with a conclusion about that this evening.
Amy, do you have thoughts on that?
No, that's just policy. I don't have any preference either way.
So it's hard to even give guidance without knowing what's happening with squadron, but that should be part of the consideration of the plan. You see what we're trying to do, we're trying to moderate debt service, keep taxes below 2%, so we need to see it all as part of a plan, as opposed to, I'm just doing it this year and I don't know what the plan is down the line.
I'm like you, I assume that we're gonna be asked to do squadron and to put it in the capital plan, I just don't know what year, but like you, I have that concern. But we have the same concern, but we get to a different outcome. My outcome is, I need to grab that million now because we see what's gonna happen in the out years. If squadron is gonna happen, then everybody's taking a hit, so.
And our concern is, we see what's coming in squadron, don't use your resources up right now. So that's gonna be the,
I wouldn't want your chair, your seat, Chair.
I don't want it, I
It's
don't
tough.
want yours either, the
It's
whole
tough.
situation is very, very difficult
It
right
is.
now. I mean, it may take care of itself if we turn on the news tomorrow and there's a huge stock market crash, all that money's gonna go towards refunding our pensions anyway, so that may take care of it itself.
No, we don't want
We'll
to.
pay for it with Venezuelan
Or tariffs.
Right,
oil.
So-
Have you explored tariffs?
but I
I've
also,
asked, it's not in the charter, I was gonna ask you to, please
But I-
put the tariffs in the
I
charter.
don't think we can ignore totally what's happening on the national level because it is going to, if
Well,
it
it's
continues in
affecting,
this way, impact.
it's affecting all of us, even though we
Yeah.
don't want to think about it and we have the authority to manage our towns the way we want to, it is causing us to think about it.
So we've got Regina is may be needed elsewhere, so she may not make it back there, so it's a little bit of a problem that she's addressing. Okay, so I think we'll just say use your best judgment on that 1 million. But
Thank you, Chair. Good enough.
present it, but please present it as part of a comprehensive
Oh, yeah.
detailed plan with squadron so that we can see the impact.
Well, the capital plan won't have squadron in it unless I'm told to put it in there. I
If it's happening in the next 5 years, it needs to be in there.
haven't been told.
Well, you control the capital plan, so are you putting it
I-
in the next 5 years?
Well, the Board of Selectmen has to approve it.
Yeah, but you have to make the first recommendation. So,
If I don't, can the Board of Selectmen put it in?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe so. We can't act on it unless the Board of Selectmen approves it. I don't think you're the charter expert here. Does he have to recommend it to the Board of Selectmen? That would seem crazy.
No, they can
Right,
create whatever they want. You're making a recommendation. and
with
you can-
4 votes per.
With 4 votes.
If I put it in, 3 votes is sufficient for it to stay in.
no, you need 4.
No, I don't. They need 4 to change it, and that's the sea change in the form of government. The budget is the town manager's budget until the.
No, but anything in the CIP that wasn't in there before,
Well,
the previous year requires 4 votes for it to be in there.
that's true, just because of the supermajority.
Yes.
Right, okay. But in the out years, it doesn't. Right? Is it only, I think it's
No,
only if
that's
you,
correct.
only if you put it in year 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
As
I
I
don't
understand, is
expect that
that
that's happening.
what you guys see?
I don't think we need to clear this up tonight.
No.
I think we can move on to the next topic.
So no change in guidance at this point, give us your best effort. Strong
I don't
preference to
feel like
C
I have
squadron.
enough information to change the guidance, and there seems to be some peaceful disagreement about exactly what the guidance is, but what we seem to agree on is that we need more information and it's subject to change.
But there is no, I just clarified a couple of things, that
Yes,
10 million every 2 years is for the entire CIP and the
that
current
is my
budget.
understanding as well.
Okay, just wanna make sure we're in
I feel strongly
consensus
that
on
that
that.
is what we intended when we passed that.
It doesn't even have to be, it can be what we intend today, but I just wanna
That's true.
confirm. Is everyone on board with
Yeah,
that?
that was how I
Okay.
understood it.
Okay, so that's, just wanna clarify that. Is there anything else you need clarity on from our guidance or that
No,
you're?
that's very helpful, Chair, and I appreciate your, meeting us halfway on the million. I know that that's an interpretation, but we're looking under every rock, and we're doing everything we can to get to the bottom line that we need to be at. So I appreciate that very much.
And the structure, we'll be focused on structurally balanced, recurring revenue, recurring expenses. Okay, so we have in our packet the draft annual report. I asked Amy just to pull up what the Board of Ed's, this, GFOA, I'm not gonna make us read it, but I will forward it as to their recommendation. This is called a popular annual report. It is used after the big book that we just received from Amy, the audit. It's a way of taking that and making it accessible to the public, and GFOA has guidance on what it should look like, what it should include, and the basic thing is it's using the same audit but taking it and putting it in layman's term in an understandable way, using pictures and graphs so that the public can understand. They recommend that it be done no later than 6 months after the fiscal year. Obviously, we're not gonna hit that best practice. But I asked just to sort of see where out there, Glastonbury's is done, Avon's is done, a number of them are already done, so if you wanna see how other people do it. But since we have the Board of Ed's, theirs is done, you'll see that it's kind of crazy. We read it not left to right, but right to left. But just look at it graphically, you'll sort of see what it looks like. There's the letter, there's 2 columns, you'll see charts, graphs, pictures. It's broken up in a way that's accessible to read. And that's what GFOA does recommend, other than the left to right.
Are there any more pictures?
Little ones.
And we
I'm
saw
looking
that
for my
Franklin
son.
gave us one, there's some good content there. I don't think we're there graphically or in a way that's accessible for the public yet. But we have good news from Lalitha and Mike Doyle have offered to work with Franklin on the formatting and to get it to look like something that we would be proud to present at a private business board presentation. So we can get it to where we need to be, and both Lalitha and Mike have great expertise on computers. At this point, it's not substance. I did talk with Amy as to what numbers should be in there from the annual comprehensive report, and she recommended the RSI 1 and 2, which is budgeted revenue to actual, budgeted expenditures to actual. And that's in the book. So that's about 5 pages. That would just go in the end so that the public can sort of see where it is. Anything we can do to create graphs, pictures. We might not even be able to get to everything that we want in the first year, but just to make it a little bit easy to read. Right now, you know, the presentation that, thank you to Franklin, he took a good first shot at it, but it needs some structuring and
Happy to do that.
okay, so with that objection, we'll go ahead and appoint Lolita and Mike Doyle to work with Franklin to get it in a structure.
And
With
thank you
my
for putting the
enthusiastic
substance,
support.
What?
and thank you for putting the substance in.
That was
You know,
Franklin.
you know, because that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Making it accessible is easier if the information is correct.
So, and you know, so we'll, thank you to Franklin, we are still missing some information, obviously, the first selectman and Mr. Tyndall have not, so when you see Mr. Tyndall, if you can remind him to get in his letter.
So Chair, I haven't seen the draft, but was Franklin able to get you, I mean, there were no department heads that were no.
No, there were some department heads that already submitted.
No, are there any that are outstanding that he
I,
needed
you know,
help?
we got it like an hour before we came, so I haven't really had a chance to read it. So we'll see whatever's outstanding
Yeah,
there.
let me know if there's, I don't think there shouldn't be anything narrative textual.
No, I think what, like I said, the substance was looking pretty good, it's just the presentation needs some work so that it's accessible and readable.
I know you had asked for things from every committee, so I don't know if, like the
We
public
did
building
ask-
committee, I
I
didn't
told
see
Franklin,
responses
we're
from
not
some.
gonna get it, we got stuff from EDC and Charter, which were actually honestly the two most important to get it from
Okay,
this past year, and then next year we'll work, I mean, we're not expecting perfection in year one, progress, not
okay.
perfection. But we'll start it, the rollout of that, I think we can do better next year to get. So every year we'll improve on it, but I think we wanna aspire to something that you would show at a professional board meeting, that our residents all work at boards and do board
Yeah.
presentations, we wanna get it to the professional level that they do at work.
We should, yeah, we'll make it perfect next year.
Right,
This
this is the
year,
first year
yeah.
is get it out and to the extent we
Yeah,
can,
because we're
aim to get
behind.
it out in February if we can.
Yeah.
So if you guys would just contact, or Mark, if you could ask
Yes.
Franklin
I'll let
to
him
set
know,
up a
yeah.
meeting with Lolita and Mike Doyle.
Yeah, and maybe we can even do it over Zoom
Yeah,
and just go
absolutely.
over it and
and thank Mike for us, he's great too, so
He
thanks
is
for
great.
volunteering. Lalitha, you keep volunteering, you gotta
I know I've got to,
watch that calendar,
yeah. Well, you know, CRC falls off,
I
so
know, Franklin too. He did a
Well,
lot
he-
of work on the charter.
he did a great job.
Terrific.
We love Franklin.
Good, thank
Okay.
you, Chair.
So we now just have a review of the minutes, and those are on page 52 and 55 of the report. I had just one, I think, two just grammatical changes at the bottom of page 52. Ms. Sentner spoke about the grant list projections were expected to increase by 46% instead of to be an increase of 0.46. And then on page 53, COLA should be in all caps at the top.
Wow, you read that, you caught that, huh?
Well, I probably missed some. In terms of the Board of Finance agenda planning, that's just a communication draft, we can change any of it. Already, we were gonna have fiducian come, the auditors come in January, their schedule didn't work, so we're gonna do the auditors in
Okay.
February, and
And the July date.
the July date should be the 21st, not the 17th. And at the bottom, I just gave reports, these are the kind of things, if anybody wants a presentation, we can put that stuff in. We do have at the end, this was part of our contingent approval when we did the Simsbury PAC to get the monthly reports on status of the project, and we got that from Tom Roy. Please extend our thanks to him for that.
That was great,
That was very helpful.
very nice.
Very nicely done. And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
First I move to adopt the minutes subject
Oh,
to
right.
your
Thank you.
suggestion.
I have a second.
I have to abstain because I was not in attendance.
I'll second, I was wondering if he'd want to
Can
second.
we pass it with 3 votes? Yes.
Yes, because we have 4 present. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Then that passes now.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you. All right,
You
thanks
can't pass that, you gotta stay all night.
You know we will, right?
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town.
Bringing us together through local programming,
Education, and live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings,
and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SEM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth, and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
where your town,
your schools,
and your government come together.